Alrighty, so let's kick it off. So welcome everybody. We haven't got a big team today, so a few numbers, which is good. Then we'll get a kick on through this quite quickly and have plenty of time for questions. So hopefully you've got plenty of questions up your sleeves. Ready to go? Kirsty, can you just flick on the next slide?
Absolutely.
Well, look, there's a lovely photo. So you know who I am, Bruce Pike, I'm the account manager. We've got Kirsty there, so we've already met Kirsty.
Hey.
Sarah sitting next to Kirsty there, and Will. And our guest for today is Nick. Yep. Thanks for coming. Nick's from MYOB. So welcome. So a little bit of housekeeping. So the emergency procedure. If there is an emergency, please downstairs, turn left, and there's a microphone out in the gardens out there. Hopefully it won't be too wet if that does happen. Toilets out the door, turn to your right. There's also some toilets downstairs by the cafe. You've done your postcards. It was wonderful. And there's some feedback forms. So in your packs, there's an agenda, there's some printed slides, and right through is a feedback form. So the feedback form is very important for us to help us steer the next conversation. Let us know what's working, what's not working. So please ensure that you pull it out very end before you go. We're going to compete with noise this morning. We've got Mike Perrick next door. They're probably running an auction in the next 2 rooms, and I've got about 90 people. So it's going to be pretty busy next door. Wonderful. Slide. So today's agenda. So we look at what is job costing. Hopefully you're on the right place. You're on job costing. Yes. Not you. Yes. Good. Job costing in the GL. We've got our GL expert Sarah joining us today. Thank you, Sarah. Customised job costing. We'll cover that with both Will and Kirsty. And also job invoice batch engine. Now some of you might be familiar with our EXO soft products. We've got a product called Jive that does a lot of this for you. So there's a batch engine for invoicing. So those that use it actually love it. Will's going to talk a little bit more about it later on. Jeanette Campbell, hopefully from Setpoint, is going to tune up any moment now. She's going to breeze through that door and say, I'm here. She did phone me today and say she was feeling a bit under the weather. So I'm not too sure if she's going to breeze through the door or I'll just have to go through her slide deck for her. And of course we've got Nick from MYOB. Nick's going to talk about MYOB, what they're doing, what's on the roadmap coming through, what's new and exciting. So we've got a chance now to feedback to Nick directly into MYOB. Any questions you want Nick to address later on, I'm sure you're welcome those. Good, so now we've got a number of repeat offenders in the room. A couple of newbies. Angela here has been before. Kathy has not been before either. So the idea behind this is to bring all our users together to help share information around job costing. Now we as the EXO guys, my consultants here are all the experts on job costing, so they've got a way of doing job costing, which is usually best practice. But you users out in the field have probably adapted some other ways of doing it as well. So it's good that we can all sort of cross-pollinate. You can talk amongst yourself. You'll hear gems hopefully today. We're going to have some tips and tricks later on, so hopefully you'll pick up new ways to do stuff. But the idea is collaboration, so it's a form for sort of talking amongst ourselves. We really encourage you, as the users, to keep this conversation going. So I think everybody's quite comfortable if we all share contact details, email details, so you can have conversations offline, that's fine. We do run a LinkedIn page as well, so you can share thoughts, comments there. Call me down in the table as the moderator, so we'll keep an eye on what you say. So you need to just make sure that you're keeping happy and keeping us engaged in terms of what your problems are so we can deal with them. So as that last part of the slide talks about why participating, Christian, you were talking about it earlier, it's a big investment buying an application like this, so it's not an off-the-shelf product, it's something that you've got to feed, you've got to scope it, deliver it, then you've got to feed and nurture it for the next 5 to 10 years as your business changes. So it's great that you have these kinds of conversations and have the ability to talk to one another and talk to us as well. So it's all about participation.
What is job costing?
I'll introduce Kirsty. Kirsty's from Invercargill. She may win the furthest travel today.
Oh, is there prizes? Please say it's chocolate.
Sheffield. Oh, well, so Kirsty's based in Invercargill. She's part of the team that is responsible for Time Track. I think we heard a couple of uses of Time Track in the room. Time Track to us about job costing.
Yeah, thank you. I will apologise in advance for my technical ineptitude. You'd think for somebody in an IT company I'd be able to figure out how to get the screens to work on these things, but no. So what is job costing? Essentially, nuts and bolts, nothing else. It is for capturing time and materials against a particular piece of work. Okay, so anybody that's got job costing, that's basically what they're trying to achieve. But as we all know, it actually has loads of stuff that we can do with it. It's a highly customizable piece of software. So I understand from Sarah that I need to minimize this one and this one. No, go back into the slideshow. That one. Okay, someone else drive. Do we need to switch the screen? Possibly not.
It's fairly complicated because there are only a number of EXO databases on this machine.
Cool. Right. We'll run with this. I'm just going to shift that back a little bit so I can see what I'm doing. And I am cheating today. I have notes that I'm going to read off because I'm nervous. Okay? Okay. So the job costing module is an additionally licensed program that fully integrates with EXO Business. So there is quite a seamless integration in terms of the accounting process behind the scenes. It provides additional functions set around managing projects, entering quotes and estimates, accumulating time and costs, and invoicing via several methods. As a job progresses, time and materials associated to that job are recorded. This information allows users to capture the projected costs and the actuals of each piece of work. So this, in any industry, is always a really tough thing to achieve. Job costing does this through lots of customization. It tracks the initial inquiry from your clients through to the completion and invoice of the job. You can have attributes like statuses, categories, types, dates, managers, which can be defined right down to the job levels, but also capture the greater picture of your organisation and how your jobs work. You can add documents, history notes, quoting, purchase orders. If you didn't know that, you can do that. So you can purchase your stock straight onto the job. A job will capture and accumulate the actual costs and sale values. Serialized stock can be used. Fantastic if you work with big things that you have to track long term for your clients. And jobs allow flexible invoicing, so you can invoice time and materials, so do the job, invoice it out, per a quote, via a billing schedule, so if you've got staged invoicing that you do, or via asset creation. Billing schedules allow for progress claims and pro forma invoices. It has a stock location called Work in Progress, or WIP, which I will go into a little bit more, which is tracked. And the WIP is automatically now integrated into the general ledger. So older versions of EXO, this wasn't part of EXO, but it is very much now in the current versions. You can have comprehensive reports, which are created to monitor the progress of your jobs and analyse completed jobs. Anybody in a jobbing industry understands how important it is to see how profitable your jobs are after the job is done. And you can have formal documentation such as invoicing, quotes, and user-defined documents. So by user-defined documents, I'm talking about checklists that need to be completed off. If you work with government agencies, you may have forms that they require to have filled out and all those sorts of things. So job costing can have those being generated out of job costing. Anybody with time track will understand that we can do that separately from job costing, but save those documents into the jobs themselves anyway. Okay, so we've got job costing up in the screen. This is my screen here. And to be honest, to start with, a lot of what I'm going to show you isn't active, but I just wanted to get you in this screen to start with so that you can see I've got some jobs and things here. Most of you may have seen the screen already, and for those that haven't, this just gives you a quick overview of the work that you've currently got on the go. Right, now I will have to refer back to the thing because I think I'm jumping over now to my co-worker to discuss the quick points and cool tips and tricks. No, first I have to tell you what work in progress is. Right. Sorry, that was my bad. Work in progress. We often refer to this as WIP without the H generally. And we talk as with WIP with you often. And I know from experience, and it's usually a year or so down the track, that a client says to me, what is WIP? What are you talking about? I have no idea what you're on about. Totally guilty of understanding that myself and not actually ever taking the time to communicate it with a client. So WIP is essentially a stock location. Okay, and what happens is that it's pretty much just a holding bay for your stock that is out on a job. From that point onwards, you can either return the stock back through a cancelled line into your stock count because it wasn't used on the job, or you can complete it through into an invoice and bill it out to the client based on the job. What WIP really gives us, though, is the ability to make sure that our stock on hand is accurate because the stock that has physically gone out into the job is no longer countable in your stock tank. It gives you the ability to report upon the stock that's currently sitting out on site or being used on a job if you don't have sites that you go visit. So you can actually see in reporting what's being consumed on a job or is potentially being consumed on a job, because obviously what you invoice is not necessarily everything that's gone out. So WIP is an essential holding bay for your stock before you actually invoice out that stock onto your jobs. And that is what WIP is. So when we're referring to your WIP location, we're talking about the materials that are in WIP. It's really, really important that you understand what we're talking about, especially when we stress that you clear out the WIP location. Because quite often a job can get completed without everything actioned on a job, be it that you write the lines off, that's gone, you return the stock back into your stock count via a cancelled line, or you bill it out to the client. Otherwise, when you're running your WIP reports out of EXO or your work in progress reports, you're going to show that you have a lot of value on your jobs still, even though they're completed. And that might not actually be accurate. You might have billed them like from a quote line or a progress bill or something like that. So again, WIP is an actual physical thing that we need to account for, and it needs to be routinely maintained, just like any other stock location.
So, Kirsty, can I just ask a question then?
Yeah.
So is that sort of like a common problem that you're encountering when you're talking to our clients?
It's a constant.
They haven't taken it out of WIP.
Yeah.
Right, they do exactly what you just said not to do.
Yep. And what it will do is it will give you an inflated sense of what your value of your stock is, or an incorrect analysis of the value of your stock, because it's classed as a stock location. So it means that it's thinking you've actually got the stock. What might have happened, though, is that you've actually already consumed it on the job, and it's not actually in stock. It just hasn't been billed because your billing model, your invoicing model, may not have captured it all in. So every time you run a report to judge whether or not you've still got stock sitting in a job or in progress, then it's, or work in progress, even better, then obviously your reporting is not going to be accurate. You're not going to be able to judge whether or not you're truly, having a profit out of each of your jobs, because it's going to think you've still got, value in your stock sitting on a job.
It's stock on hand is generally an asset in the balance sheet, and work in progress is just a sub-categorisation of the asset. So you are actually inflating the value of your assets by holding on to WIP in the balance sheet when it should have been cancelled or written off or attached to a progress invoice. So it can really alter the impact of your financial accounts if you don't deal with the profit.
And now you can see why I have my GL superstar.
Does that resonate with anyone? Or maybe that's like a question,
Yeah.
Time to ask a question?
Yeah.
Because that is a definite issue, but
Yeah.
the problem is that you've got lots of staff doing stuff and you don't know what they've done wrong, and so now you've got a whole lot of stuff sitting in work. And my problem is I either have to track back to every job and fix it, or how can I do it easy ways?
Really good question.
Yeah.
Yes.
How can you do it easy?
Yes. Jibe is an easy tool for that, in that it gives you a giant overview of your jobs and you can manage it within a single screen, but I'll let Will delve deeper into that one. But without Jibe, you're going to rely very heavily on your reporting, and Focus can customize your reporting to look at, say, a job status of completed or to be invoiced or something like that, so that your list is much, much shorter, that you're dealing with those jobs that do have outstanding WIP stock counts versus, you know, maybe just a general job report, which might not give you quite the filtering that you need to return just the results that you need.
There's another option as well.
Yeah.
Which is just like say, so it's kind of like a retrospective and a proactive version. So
yeah.
Business alerts themselves.
Yes. Yes, business alerts.
So I'm going to mention about business alerts later on. So a very powerful feature of the system.
Fantastic. Great. Yep. So far we've come up with business alerts, reporting, and Jibe. So we can definitely handle it, but any industry that works in job costing has at some point generally found that they've got things on a job that they don't want there or that shouldn't be there. So yeah, we welcome that conversation with you so that we can make sure that your businesses are running cleanly, for lack of a better description there. Right, so I'm going to pass over to my esteemed colleague, Will.
Hi everyone. So I'm not going to actually be looking at the PowerPoint directly because you've got them in front of you, and I think it's probably nicer if I show you just quickly the screens that I'm talking about in EXO, which is, it helps if I look at the one in front of me. So I was just going to talk about some of the quick tools, and these are, the first one is actually available everywhere in job costing or in EXO. Oh, that's lovely. So in job costing, but also in standard EXO and in CRM, there is a task scheduler which allows you to set up appointments, you know, schedule that you're using a resource. So you can say, I've got something booked out for a job. We could use it to schedule staff or equipment, but we can also use it to set up opportunities, campaigns, meetings, and these can all be synced through into Outlook if that's something that's useful for your business. And one of the good features of it is that if you've got someone who's in charge of setting your meetings or service coordination, they can go through and do that to other staff members. So that's just one of those quick, neat things there. Yes.
Work both ways. It only go what we set in here as a task goes through to Outlook, not convert, not the other way.
We can get it to go both ways. So there's an option in the EXO config for what task types. You'll set a little flag and you'll sync everything that's got that flag from Outlook back and forth. So if you want it to go both ways, it can. The one thing I'll say is that you have to actually have someone click the button each day to make it sync back and forth. But it can definitely bring that information from Outlook if you want to set that up. So yeah, that's a great question. Thank you, Christian. So the other quick thing in this main screen is recent items, which is just what it says. It's a quick list of screens you've been in recently. And obviously this is a demo database, so I've only been in one screen, but I can go straight to the cash sales account by clicking on it here. So it's quite useful if you've been doing a bunch of things. Yeah.
Sorry. Is that supposed to track a whole week? Because I find every time I log off and log in, it sort of starts fresh.
I will need to grill my friend Nick about that a little bit. It used to track everything forever, and that caused a problem with MYOB. So they changed it, and I know your business, because I've talked to Alex on your behalf, is having an issue where for some reason yours isn't tracking a whole week, but usually it tracks a whole week. So,
Sorry, just can you repeat the question?
oh, sorry.
Just the microphones are taken out.
Oh, sorry about that. So the question there was, is the recent item supposed to track a whole week? And the answer is yes. If it's not, that's something you should talk to us about, and if we can't figure it out, we'll have to talk to MYOB, who today is in the form of Nick. And the earlier question was about syncing information back from Outlook, which we can do. There are some settings in Outlook and in EXO config that you go back and forth. So I'm just going to quickly click through to my next slide, which is talking about direct time entry. So there's this direct entry option here for direct material entry or direct time entry just below it. And this is a great screen if I'm doing a whole bunch of work on multiple jobs. So I can just come in here and I can say, oh, excellent. So job code 10. Sorry for the beeping. But as you can see, it's really quick for me to just go through and I can enter everything that I've been handed on all the different job sheets against all the different jobs without having to go into a bunch of different screens for each of those jobs. So, you know, it's really useful for someone who's bulk entering data. And there's the same version for timesheets and direct time entry just below it. So I should stop looking at the screen because I realise I'm supposed to stare at the camera. So Kirsty already showed quickly the plan and maintain jobs screen, which is just the big overview screen. But you can see that it's got lots of search options up the top here, so it's actually really quite easy for me to go drilling for different parts of the jobs. And there's an extensive search option as well. We can add extra fields to the search. It is quite a good way to get a quick overview of your jobs. And dashboards, probably the last thing we'll be talking about at the moment. Yep. The dashboards are an option. Now these dashboards have been getting rolled out by MYOB to more and more places in EXO. They started in jobs, and they're a really neat way to see a bunch of information. So you can set up little reports or usually there's little reports that just bring through the information you need to know about where you are. So you can do this on a debtor, you can do this on a sales order, you can do this in a job to see exactly how much cost has gone in, how much profit you're supposed to be making, what you've quoted and what you've invoiced. So that's a default one. If you want that tweaked to match your business a little bit more, we can do that. If you've got something else that you think, I just really need to see this information, this is a great little screen we can just add things to. If I click up here, I can stick an extra widget in. Obviously I picked the wrong one because it's not very pretty. No, it's telling me that the quota's expired, and it'll tell me if something's exceeded or over budget. So that's usually quite a nice one. So that is it for my quick tips for the moment.
Any questions?
Check.
I've got a question.
Yes?
I was just going to say, you know, on direct timesheets and direct materials,
Yes?
do you want to mention about the copy and paste?
There is that's an excellent thing, and I should have thought about that. So you can just copy and paste into these screens. So if you've got everything filled out in an Excel spreadsheet, you can just copy the whole spreadsheet and paste it straight into here, and it will just fill out line by line. We've used that successfully ourselves to set up whole job quotes. So you can use that in quite a few of the screens for job costing. You need those, but I can have that in my spreadsheet. So I could have a spreadsheet that had 10 columns. Just copy the spreadsheet, so I don't have to retype it from the spreadsheet if somebody else has entered it on a spreadsheet.
So we used to actually use it internally for our timesheets, and I'd have exactly the same thing on the top spreadsheet with, you know, the jobs that I've done and slogan, and based on those columns, you just copy and then right click on the top and it goes paste columns and it just drops straight into that. So it's a very quick method.
And just to sort of extend what we're talking about, you can also do this in the quote budget tab. So when you're building your quotes and things and the completes and got layers, you can do that in the quote budget tab of the job as well. You can have template in Excel that you can then bulk import into quotes, edit as required.
Can you do that on the quote tab in CRM versus just job costing?
It's a great question, Graham. I'll check for you.
Well, okay.
So thank you very much. You'll notice in your slides that there's a fun fact. And if I can get the slideshow back up, you can all find out about. When you turn 100.
You don't wonder how they came up with that. Oh, you got to stop at 99.
No more Legos.
No more Legos.
So I'll hand over to Sarah because she's up to talk to you about job costing and how it interacts with the general ledger. Just a thrilling topic that we all need to know about.
Yes, absolutely. Now we've had quite a lot of inquiry around this sort of the setup required for GL and for just basically people just want an explanation of what they're posting, why does it go to a particular location and when does it go there. So we thought we'd cover that off. You all will have a handout in your pack that's related to what I'm going to speak on today because I'm giving you a lot of information, but it's not something that it's probably going to matter much until you go back to the office and have a look and start poking around in your system just to see where things are, what things are happening. Now I just need to switch the databases here, so just bear with me for a moment please. So what I'm going to cover today for a start is the main configurations that you can set up within EXO that determine where job costing transactions post into your general ledger. The first setting that determines the GL outcome from job costing is whether or not you're on periodic or perpetual inventory. Now you'll see that on your handout there is an explanation of the difference of the two. And I'm just going to quickly duck into EXO config and show you where you can review this information within your system. There's a screenshot of it on your handout, but hopefully this is where it lives basically. So you can see here it's just a tick box, and the system that we're looking at today is perpetual. Now I have to caution everyone very strongly that changing these settings without reviewing the change with one of our software consultants will likely result in problematic GL transactions and stock postings, and it will make them pretty unreconcilable. So if you have a look at your stock status and you think, I actually want to be on perpetual and I'm on periodic, that transition sort of has to be undertaken with us, and so that we can get your stock correct to begin with, and we can transition you to the new system and make sure that it stays reconcilable. And it's a really important thing for your end of financial year accounts that these transactions are posted and the accumulation of stock in your balance sheet is done correctly. Now, one of the most noticeable differences that end users will see will be where stock on hand is in the financial reports. In a periodic environment, you'll see opening and closing stock in the direct cost section of the P&L, and the difference being the cost of goods sold. So the subtraction of one from the other in the P&L is the value of your cost of goods sold. Whereas in the perpetual stock environment, stock on hand is in the balance sheet with the cost of goods sold being calculated on a per transaction basis. So it takes the cost of the stock as it's brought into your system, it follows that through to the point where it's invoiced, and it does the sale price less the cost price, that's your cost of goods sold. Due to the fact that periodic inventory systems don't post every transaction through to the general ledger, we're just going to have a look at perpetual today. To begin with, the type of stock item you are transacting with determines a large part of what gets posted to the GL. There are 3 types of stock in your system, so I'm just going to pop into maintain. I'm just going to review them. I'll set these up so that they can be so that we can have a look at them today. You won't have these stock items. So the first thing we're going to look at is a lookup stock item. And you can just see that in the flag section, it's just got a tick in the lookup box. So a lookup stock item is a non-stocked stock item. So for example, your labour that you put on jobs is a non-stocked stock item. But a lookup only stock item doesn't record a cost. So it's not going to post any costs through the GL, it's only going to post its sale. The next type we're going to look at is a lookup recoverable stock item, which is, you can see it's got a tick in the lookup box, but it's also got a tick in the recoverable box. So this is the same as before. It's a non-stocked stock item, but it does post a cost. So you can see the cost section over here. You determine the cost. The average cost is not calculated. It's a field that you can overtype, unlike your primary stock items where the average cost is a calculation, and to change that you'd have to do the average cost adjustments. And then the last type is a recoverable stock item, which is just your normal type of stock. So it's things that you buy in and then sell out at a percentage margin increase or something along those lines. You see that the average cost box here is, can you see that it's grey as opposed to white? That means that it's a calculated field and that we can't overtype it. The next important setup on each stock item is over here in details 2. Now you've got ledger posting profiles here, and they determine where transactions are posted into the GL. So this is the really important section here. Now when you've set up a stock item, it gets these codes from somewhere. That they can be changed with the exception of the purchases clearing GL code on recoverable stock items, but they inherit their ledger posting profiles from your GL control accounts. Now, are any of you familiar with your GL control accounts setup and config? Yes, so that's what determines where things get posted and where those defaults are set against your stock items. So we're just going to flick back to EXO Business. You can see that this is just a standard. I haven't changed anything, and it's got its sales GL code set to sales and its cost of sales GL code set to the cost of sales. If we have a look back in here, we can see that those two accounts are the defaults in the GL controls account section. If these were to change and we were to set up new stock items, they would inherit the new ones, but we can also change them in here. Now that we've gone through the different stock types and briefly described each one, we're going to go through the transaction types in job costing and demonstrate how they use the GL ledger accounts and what the posting outcome of each is. Now you will see on the handout, I believe it's on the very last page, there's quite a lengthy explanation of the different stock types and the different transaction types within job costing. So you've got adding lines to a job as a transaction type, writing lines off, cancelling lines, invoicing a job, and creating an asset. Now, is anyone here familiar with the create asset function within EXO? So what that is it's used when you buy stock in and then you modify it in some way, and you can use a job to record those modifications, and at the end of the job, instead of invoicing it, you use the create asset function, and that generates new stock items for you and inserts them into your stock on hand. So if you do that, if you have internal processes around that where you're sort of modifying an existing stock item and you want it to have a different stock code at the end of the process, you can use the job costing function for that. And the create asset is really create stock item, and we have to talk to Nick about why it's called the wrong thing.
So is there any particular industry that uses it, Sarah?
I see manufacturing is very strong for it, particularly in engineering, where perhaps they get a length of pipe in and they have to turn it into some pre-formed shape. Yep. So they'll have a certain amount of time allocated for bending and welding and things like that. And then at the end of the process, they might do 50 at once as a batch, and then they just create those new 50 stock items. And it deals with all the costs and the posting and everything like that. It just creates them as a new stock item, and then that allows you to then use them again without having to, on an every job basis, say, I've got this much labour and this much welding rod and everything like that as a part of this job. So it's, yeah, and it's used especially if workshops have like a quiet time or some downtime and they want to give their staff something to do, but it's got to be measurable. You know, they just don't want them mucking around, so they do.
That's a really good thing.
Yeah, so,
I can explain why it's called great asset.
yes.
So it's used for, like I say, various different applications, and the asset is basically because stock is an asset, or if potentially if we're building an actual piece of machinery, even though it's a piece of stock, it may be tracked based on fixed assets as well. So it might even be a serviceable unit that you then create and you can service that asset. The other thing that's quite notable as well is that you can create multiple assets as well. So I used to be, back in the day, I used to be a welder fabricator. So we get a sheet of metal and then put it into pieces. We make actually 4 or 5 different assets. So you can actually create multiple assets from that single sheet and then roll those different stock items into stock. So you're still using, it took me 2 hours to make all of these things, but I've actually made 6 different items. So you actually make 6 different assets.
Well, that's good to know.
Yes.
Would it use it instead of using kick codes? We have a valve that has like a couple of O-rings and an actuator and it's 5 or 6 pieces, but it's sold as one part.
Yeah.
We're currently doing a head code for that, so it's bringing through because the parts do actually come in individually and the guys make them up. So that we want this to be able to track the cost, so the cost of those items go up, the cost of the solid item also goes up.
Yeah.
Or would you say that using assets would be better?
Oh no, I think kit codes in that situation is good use. It's just if you're adding any labour component to it, it makes that just a lot more straightforward, particularly if you've got a system like Time Track that automatically puts time onto jobs and things like that. You already got that recording of information happening. So yeah, but yeah, kit codes will still work in a situation where it's component only. All right, so I've set up these test jobs for all different things. You can see that I've quite handily named them what I need to call them. This is just, and I'm really just going to go through and just post very quickly on each one. I'm just going to post each type of stock item once, and then we're going to post to the GL so that you can see the outcome on that GL level. Look up. Now I learnt when I was demoing these things that you put your cost price in different, so it's not the same on every stock item, so that when we post through to the GL that we can see the actual different stock items coming through. So just going to save that. Now that's just adding lines to a job. You'll all be familiar with that, whether you do that in this screen or whether you do it in the bulk entry screen that Will used earlier, or whether you use Time Track or Timesheet Manager to assign stock to a job. This is all where it ends up essentially. So if we just hop back into here, we go to our end of month, we post our ledgers, and we just run a new post run. I'm using all unposted, and that's what I recommend, but not everyone does it. So then we can just have a look at this, and this is just telling us what everything's posted to. So the $68.60 is our recoverable stock item, and the $60 is our lookup recoverable stock item, and because our lookup stock item doesn't post a cost, it's not showing anything here. It does bother me that EXO shows the credit side of the entry before the debit side, but that's just an accountant thing, I think. Yeah, it does give me a bit of an eye twitch. But you can see it's posting based on the accounts that are set up against your GL control accounts and also against your stock items. Now, it posts through to work in progress. We alluded to that earlier. It's not just a separate stock location. It is a different GL code, and it ought to be as well. I've seen systems where stock on hand and the work in progress account have been set up to the same account, and I think that's just a sort of a bit of a confusion of the information. Work in progress should be reconcilable, so we can run reports for you, put reports in place for you where the value of your work in progress can be broken down to every single line on every single job that's at a work in progress or ready to invoice status. they will be what makes up your work in progress. So it's pretty straightforward, but that's just one of the sort of connections that sometimes people don't automatically make, is that's what results in the work in progress in your balance sheet, is the addition of lines to jobs at work in progress or ready to invoice status. They are the value of your work in progress in your balance sheet. So that's just a wee connection you can draw now. So you can see that's what's been posted, the purchases account. That was, we can just quickly just tick back into our stock item and show you to look up recoverables. So that's that purchase account set up there. Now we can go back out of here and we can just create asset, just to give you a wee demonstration of what's going on here. So we've got, I've pre-added the lines to these ones because I was trying to be ready for anything. So we send those all to the invoice section, which moves us down to the invoice tab, and then we've got create asset here. So we're just going to create a single asset, which means it's just going to be one stock item. It's not us making that noise, is it? No. It's just going to be one stock code that we're generating. We're just going to say that this obscure list of codes is what makes up some alloy wheels. And it just asks you quantity, and we're going to say, yep, that actually made 5. And then it gives you the date, the age, and all that sort of fun stuff. We go, okay. Or do we? Pardon? Oh yes, sorry. We're going to put it into Auckland. And it's just saying you're going to create 5 of these at this cost price, and we say, yes, please. We go hook back over to our post ledgers. So you can see the cost of the lines being removed from work in progress here and here, and then the combination of that being added back into stock on hand. If we were now to go back into the stock, find the stock item that we added, we raised it out of the wheels. I think it was these ones. Was it these ones, Kirsty? Yeah, you can see that. We didn't make 35 of them, did we? 25 of them. Yeah, so there's that's that coming in there. But you'll see there's a breakdown. You'll see that there's on your handout there is a breakdown of all the transaction types against all of the stock items or the stock types, and you can just, if you're ever curious, I guess, how a transaction is going to affect your GL, you can look in there and you can see it gives you an explanation of where it obtains the debit side of the transaction, the code, where it obtains the credit side, and where it obtains the value from. So it's pretty straightforward, sort of a breakdown of the information, and it's just there now for your reference point. What have I got there?
Any questions? Any questions?
So like Janine was saying, I mean, if you've physically got a whole lot of stock items like a valve or something, and you've got O-rings and whatnot, and they're actually assembled into the thing, and they're never going to be disassembled, that would kind of be better than kits, because you can't go and sell that O-ring on its own anymore.
Yeah.
So is that the way you would?
So just going to repeat this for the Invercargill people, it's just a question about, again, kits versus the use of the create asset function. And Christian's just rightly pointed out that when you're using kits, it does appear that the stock is still available to be used on other things, when in actual fact it has been consumed within the use of that kit. It's really up to you and the processes that you want to follow. We've got a lot of people that sort of generate kits sort of in advance, and and things like that, so that they don't sort of have that issue as such. But when you feel like that might be a risk, or that you don't, you want to have that stock consumed and completely unavailable, yeah, absolutely use the create asset function. It's really quick, and like you can sort of pre-can a job, so you can have it set up that it can be duplicated if you've got a standard set of lines that you want to use as a sort of to generate a batch, and you can do that relatively quickly, and it posts it all through to the GL.
So just the one thing I'd say that's a big difference from the GL is that if we're using the create asset and creating in advance, it's going to use the cost that it has at that time. Whereas if you're using a kit, then if the cost of one part of it goes up suddenly, in the future you're going to be using that new cost, or the average of the new cost. So that's the one thing I'd be aware of.
Mm-hmm. But if you are physically making a stock item and putting it back on the shelf, then you want the cost to be what was actually at the time. So there's a lot of factors to consider, and it's just basically comes down to what's going to best reflect the needs of your business.
I would definitely say it comes down to billing wise as well. Because if you're manufacturing and that's what you generally do, and then you sell the finished item, then bill material, the kit is used for bill materials, and then you create the assets. Whereas if you're more in the nature of, if you're doing like fitting windows or something like that, you would use a kit to determine what you've actually got, and then you would actually invoice it out. So you wouldn't actually create an asset. You would just generate the invoice based on this is my kit, and then you bill via that. So kind of it's based on whether you pre-manufacture or these are all of the items they're going to use, and then I bill this. So
Thanks, Nick.
For the components that made up that asset, did you say that the cost comes from each of those components?
Yes.
It's not the cost on that job cost line at the time?
The cost on the job cost line generally comes from the stock item, and depending on what you've got set up, averages.
That to be, for whatever reason, different, would it use that cost when it generates the asset and assigns that?
Yes. Yeah. It would. Yes. So, if there's no other questions, I'll finish. But before I finish, I'll quickly, very nicely, switch back over to Kirsty's.
I've got a question for you.
Absolutely.
The difference between perpetual and periodic, is one used more than the other? Is that what you find? Or are they different sectors, different markets?
It's more of a different business. So sorry for the Invercargill people. That was just a question about the how frequently we see periodic and how frequently we see perpetual stock. It's more about what the business itself wants to track. I'm a big fan of perpetual stock because it gives you a constant overview of what you have available, and it gives you the ability to track stock on a live basis, whereas with periodic you're only sort of posting your stock value at the end of the month, and if there's any significant sort of losses or gains or anything like that, you're only getting visibility over that when you post that at the end of the month, and perhaps even then you're not investigating it as thoroughly as what you might. But with perpetual stock, because every stock transaction is posting through to the GL, and you're getting basically a profitability on every stock entry, it gives you a much better overview of that, and it keeps everything a lot more live and fresh. Yes, that's why I prefer perpetual stock. I've kind of got a little bit of a bee in my bonnet about inventory and stock being one of the biggest problems in businesses today, in that it's not tracked very well, and that it's very difficult to put those systems in place around your staff and how they record things on jobs and everything like that. But if you're not using a perpetual stock system, you're already sort of cutting out a lot of the investigating and the tick-off points that you can give yourself in terms of doing reconciliations on that information. So, yeah, I could talk all day, but I won't. I'll finish up and I'll pass back over to Kirsty.
Right. Before I get started, what time was planned for morning tea?
About 10:15.
Sweet. I'll get up so that I look a whole lot taller than I really am. Yes, sorry. Sense of humour. I'm a nerd. Okay, I will go back to my attempt to go back to my slide. I used the word attempt. Oh, because the fun fact. I'm sure we've all had that discussion with our friends and things about, if you could have somebody to dinner who is famous and hard to get a hold of, i.e. dead, Albert Einstein would be my guy. I would love to sit there and talk to him forever. He's cool. Okay. Customized job costing with Kirsty. Oh, and yep, you can all see great. So as I alluded to earlier, job costing out of the box is a fairly simple sort of module, and it does require customization to match just about any business that we have. There's not many that we use job costing straight out of the box. Any consultant who sort of sets up job costing for a client that says, we only need the basics, discover 6 months down the track, that's never the basics. So job costing can meet the needs of service delivery, manufacturing and construction organisations. That kind of covers most of the industries really that would use jobbing. And focus work with our clients to make sure that their job costing does work for their businesses. And quite often it's the little things that catch everybody out. We start out with our scoping processes and we think we get a good idea, and then 6 months down the track you'll come out with something left field for that one thing that we do that's critical, but job costing currently doesn't meet. So please talk to us about those things, because we're always happy to help you meet those needs within your jobbing industries. Okay, some of the ways that we customise job costing: extra fields. Quite often your industry will need extra information that's just unique to your business, that's important to your reporting, important to your transactionally behaving, to your transactions. And they can be calculated fields as well. Okay, so we can take information from other fields, sale prices, margins, those sorts of things, and produce calculated fields, extra fields, giving you more information. We have the ability to rename or add existing columns to your search screens, and Will showed you that with the extensive search you can include them into your filtering in those search screens in job costing. What we can do in job costing, we can mirror across our other search fields, so your data transactions, your sales orders, purchase orders, all those sorts of things. That behaviour is across the product. We can put in SQL triggers which can add or manipulate the data behind the scenes. So we often have that, especially in jobs, because quite often you might have a behaviour of where a job, some information hits a job and we want to automatically change it through to a new status, or update the categories, or do some shifting of the lines and things like that. So we can actually get quite clever. Just to give you a working example, I'm going to pick on poor Graham here. We've recently added in some customization around documentation and shifting it between an external product and job costing, making it very easy for his team to save documents. We haven't gone live with it yet, but it looks awesome in testing. And basically push it through into the external product and then pull it back into job costing again once the guys are done with it. So this is all through customization. This is actually quite advanced. Job costing reports. Now quite often jobbing sites don't have enough reporting to give them the true details that they need on their job costing sites. And quite often you don't know what kind of reporting that you need. The only way that we can really establish the kind of reporting you need is getting a consultant out on site so that they can have a look at the gaps, okay, in what you need. And quite often management don't actually get the proper overview of where their businesses are at. We can create custom forms like invoices and quotes. Not sure if you're aware of the fact that you can have more than one. Okay, so you can have one layout dependent, an invoice or something like that, that would suit a particular customer, or they may have a standard that they require because they might have, scanning and stripping data or something like that from the invoices. So we can have an invoice just for them, an invoice for everybody else. You could have quotes and different layouts and things depending on how complicated your quoting gets. And we can customize those forms for you so you can actually start delivering your formatted forms out appropriately. And finally, and this is probably the most critical step in customizing job costing, is us working through your business process with you. The way that we do things, the way that we at Focus and as a consultant go through the system, I have learned the hard way, is not the way that you go through it. Okay, your steps will be different. You'll have found the quickest way to suit your business. So it's really important that we understand how you need to get your data in, how you need to get your data out, and making sure that you have the best tools that you need to get that done quickly. Because let's face it, anytime keen in data is arduous.
And you'll all probably use job costing very differently, even though it's the same product. Each one of you here, each business will be subtly different even if you're in the same industry, and that you will end up using job costing quite distinctly differently. And yeah, it's a very customizable and adaptable program.
Sorry. Did I warn you that I'm not good at this? Fantastic. It's a good thing we have gurus here. Right, how are we for time? Okay.
You've got another 5 minutes, so.
I think I can squish in serviceable units.
Great. Who's using serviceable units, by the way?
Anybody using serviceable units?
1, 2, 3, 4, 5 of you. Fantastic.
If you didn't know, serviceable units are in Time Track.
Okay. So what are they?
Okay. Serviceable units are also an extra module which is purchased and embedded into MYOB, EXO and job costing seamlessly. While this is a fairly simple module out of the box, it is actually quite powerful when it comes to capturing work completed against a unit. Serviceable units can be used as a company-owned item and charged out to the clients, like work trucks, heavy machinery, and then I've got otherwise known as job resources. Okay, so basically they're big things that you would normally add into the cost of a job. Okay, so if you have a piece of equipment like a HIAB or something like that that gets used, that can be a job resource in a serviceable unit. Now the serviceable unit can have maintenance run against it, and to look at a serviceable unit, they look very, very simple out of the box. But actually I'll finish the blurb and then I'll show you some serviceable units. I think it's probably the best way moving forward. They can be rented out items, okay, so they can be owned by an organisation and rented or leased out to clients, and each serviceable unit, like I said, can have a running history against it. So to give you an example of a rented out item, a photocopier that your client doesn't necessarily own, but they are leasing it off you, and you will do constant maintenance against that, and you want to track not just the unit itself and the maintenance that's been done, but also the jobs and the clients that it's been assigned to. Okay, so a serviceable unit captures that information. A serviceable unit can also be the unit in itself. Okay, that's something that the client does own. So it can be out on the client's site and you want to run a history against it on every time you've visited, the parts and materials that you've used, whether or not it's something that gets to a point where it needs to be replaced, if you have a limit of hours against it or something like that, or quantity of copied things that have to happen, then that can be recorded, tracked. And from an organisational point of view, big scheme of things, your customer service goes up and you are proactive, because you are tracking the life of that unit and you are addressing your clients before they ring you up and say, it's broken, I hate it and I want a new one. And you've lost, your ability to sell them a new one. You can see that it's approaching the end of its life or something like that, and you can say, hey, look, we can see that you're coming to your end of life for your product. Can we interest you in a new product?
Tony, you put your hand up as using serviceable units. I think, give us an example of your serviceable units. How do you use it?
Ours are used on customer sites with the systems that we install.
So this is alarm systems?
Yeah, so alarm systems and access control and things like that. scheduling preventive maintenance. So within the serviceable units you can assign that it comes up periodically in the monthly reports that it's coming up due for its preventive maintenance, and then a trigger for the service manager to get in contact with the client, say that your alarm's due for this.
Time to schedule some visit.
The techs and go and do the maintenance on it.
Yep.
Excellent example of proactive customer service. Yeah.
There's probably more of the businesses with basic access controls, council requirement.
Right.
That they have maintenance agreements and that it's maintained on a regular basis and the warrants signed off, so we have to be proactive in making sure that we're meeting our obligations so the client can continue to operate.
Mm.
Yeah, we've got a similar customer who, well, not so similar, but they do gas installations and maintenance of gas-based systems, and they have a similar requirement around commercial sites where they have to be maintained or inspected on a regular basis. And what they found was even when they said, to the customer that it was their responsibility, the onus was on them to schedule that maintenance, it was falling through the cracks, a lot of it, so they switched on serviceable units for that exact reason, so that those businesses remain compliant with the law and don't have to close down.
It's a big deal.
What else will I add to serviceable units?
I have another example that's a little bit different and possibly maybe thought-provoking, hopefully. We have a client that uses serviceable units that represents golf carts. Now, these can be both owned by the client and rented out. So we're covering two quite different business models for them, two quite different billing models. They can be assigned to many golf courses over the length of their life, the golf cart. They do need parts, they do need time. So they get assigned to the job and they can have their parts and time associated to the serviceable unit in job costing. So what this means for the golf cart organisation is that they can track exactly how much time and materials that their guys are using on their serviceable units. So I will demonstrate that aspect of job costing. And
So if one golf cart, for instance, required a lot of maintenance, so a lot of run an analysis report.
Absolutely. Yeah, we're absolutely.
Well, that brand was bad.
Oh, and kill the slideshow. And of course, a golf cart can be purchased and sold again as well. So that, organisation might say, well, look, we're upgrading everything because we're going to the next level, or we've got a big, international golf tournament on or something like that, and we want big new flash things. So this company will then rebuy that stock and turn it into a leased item. So they need to keep, those serviceable units need to keep track of all of that to make sure that they are, the whole profitability of that item is captured. Now I am not in job costing. But look at that, magic, nailed job costing. For anybody who's talked to me on the phone before, I really am as goofy in real life as I am on the phone. You thought you'd get away with it. Okay, so I have a copier job here as my example. Against that I have my serviceable unit assigned. Now I could have many serviceable units to use, obviously not a copier company, but my golf carting example, they often go out to a golf course, being the job, and they will have 15 units assigned to it. Now when they put their time in for the guys, because we have serviceable units here, and this is really important for them, they can see on the line which cart, or in this case which copier, they've worked against. And you can imagine in their reporting, especially user productivity, what materials have been used for each cart, this is now quite detailed for this client. In the past, they weren't able to truly capture this information. And likewise, where I've used materials, I can say which copy of those materials have been used on. Is there any questions?
If you bought in, say you bought in 10 plastic feeders, and that's to go against 3 or 4 different copiers.
Yeah.
So you would actually split that against multiple jobs then, wouldn't you be? Because each copier would be a job.
No, in this instance, the job is the client. Yeah, and the copiers are the serviceable units. Yeah.
But you're right, it can go the other way and the job can be the serviceable unit.
And you can capture the time and materials on that. So you're not incorrect. It's just a slightly different model.
Yeah.
Yeah. Now the serviceable unit in themselves, if we drill into this one, it has a whole bunch of things that you can assign to it, and these can all be renamed to match what your units are actually going to be. So you may not have classes, makes and models, but in this case they're basically an ability to identify your units. Okay, so to go back to our copier companies, these may not be motor parts items, they would be the model number. They might be, you might have for a copier company the really big machines versus a desktop machine versus, something that's in between, handheld scanners. So all of these are useful for reporting and identifying. We can link them back to an actual stock item, and then it involves a stock transaction. And if it belongs to a stock item with a serialized, that is serialized, we can assign a serial number against that. So again, if we're using big pieces of machinery or things that are going out that are serialized, then we can start capturing all of those links. It can belong or not to a customer, i.e. owned by the customer but serviced. You can view contacts, so that's your customer's contacts, but the contact history is actually the history of the serviceable unit. If you have time track, we can write back a contact history note each time the guy saves a time entry against it. So that's just something else that's automated. You can see every job in the serviceable history that unit has belonged to. So this is where you start building up your history of your item.
This is where we get different from the job you mentioned earlier, because now you can sell it between customers, whereas it's hard to move a job between customers.
And maintain that history, yeah. Yeah. Notepad is the usual function of Notepad, scheduling it out, and of course documents, really important now for serviceable units. Most serviceable units, especially if they are things like a golf cart or something that's got details, you can now put in things like your explosion diagrams of the parts and things like that. You can have any sort of correspondence, legal, leases and things like that that belong to that unit, not just assigned to the debtor account, but to the unit itself.
For example, Tony, you'll probably have a checklist for each site you go to visit for access control, and you may want to save it against the serviceable unit.
It is. He's about to ask a quick question in that documents now. I know you can drag and drop from Outlook to create a document in there. Can that please be done for Windows Explorer?
We'll have to upgrade you.
Yeah. So thank you so much for your time so far, but it's morning tea.
Yep.
So we'll let you all go.
Head outside to your right is tea coffee, so if you come back to that 10:35, we can perhaps bring up the genetic stack.
Is it just a continuation of?
Yep.
Okay. No, progress filling pudding, we'll go back.
Go forward. And so
there we go. There we go.
So,
I'm going to break all the rules and make sure it's in PowerPoint.
no, that's fine. That's fine. That's fine.
Yep. So
Oh,
You can see on there as well.
it's on,
Okay.
it's on the screen.
Yep.
stand on the podium.
I don't know anybody. I can go up in the world.
You can.
Cool. Morning all, my name is Jeanette. I work for Setpoint Solutions. I'm their go-to girl, basically. I pretty much oversee the whole company business. We do administration, payroll, financials, right through to ready for auditing for the accountants. We deal with all the logistics of the importing of product from overseas and getting it out through the branches etc. So that's kind of my role, but at the moment, primarily for the last 3 years, I've been the go-to girl for EXO, both for our sales business and our job costing stuff. So hence, that's why I have a lot of grey hairs. And I'm going a bit bald because I pull my hair out. So we were officially incorporated in 1991, but the history behind that was the company was started by 2 guys fixing heat pumps in their garage. And then they weren't quite making enough money, so they went to work for Siemens Building Technologies, who back in those days had a presence here in New Zealand. And after 2 or 3 years, Siemens decided it wasn't profitable enough to be working here in New Zealand. They wanted to go back to Australia. So a couple of our guys got together and bought the New Zealand business off Siemens Building Technologies. So we're heavily partnered with Siemens. We spend roughly about $500,000 a month with them on product alone, and we also have, as part of the partnership agreement, a lot of reporting that we have to do for them. We have 3 branches. I better stick to the slide that I did, hey. Our primary business is building automation systems. So you come into a place like this, we will have a computerized system managing air control, energy, heat, light, gas in the car parks, etc. So that's primarily what we do. We install it, we service it, we maintain it, we update it. We've just finished doing a large job for the council, which is in our projections a little bit later on. We have a sales business, so we have a sales section, and all they do is we bring the product in from overseas and we just click the ticket, sell it, make money. And then we've also got a little subsidiary company called Smart Touch, and that is all based around all this clever home automation stuff. So if you want to get on your phone and say, it's a bit cold today, can you turn the heat pump up to 30 degrees and put the jug on and open the car door? It's that kind of really, really high end. You know, we're in the process with EQC on a rebuild fight at the moment. If we get the rebuild, I'm having this stuff because it's really clever. And the thing I want the most, that is about $18,000, just to give you an idea of the range of the product price, is a cover that sits at the bottom of a spa pool, and it will come up from the bottom of the spa pool and create a deck on the top of your spa pool so that you've got your spa pool cover. So, yeah, so my husband said, well, we haven't got a spa pool. And I said, yeah, but just look at this thing, what it does. So that's Smart Touch. We cover all of New Zealand, and including Antarctica, Stewart Island, Norfolk and Chatham. We have, once a year, we send 2 guys down to Antarctica for 6 weeks to maintain all the systems down there. And there's always a fight to put their hands up as to who's going. The only one who doesn't go is the one that did not learn. You do not go outside for a pee in the middle of the night, because he ended up having to come home and come to hospital. So, we have branches, Wellington, Christchurch, Dunedin. We have 49 staff now. We just employed 3 new staff this week. 7 directors, all of whom are owners of the company. We're members of all the things like the Green Building Council and so on that people with us, like us, should be associated with. And every year we give $50,000 to DOC as sponsorship for looking after the jeweled gecko, which is about to become extinct gecko. And our staff actually go out to the habitat, help maintain the habitat and rescue these geckos and repatriate them to where they need to be, etc. So that's just a little bit about us. Yeah. So what do we do? As I've said, we do building automation management, systems integration, energy saving management solutions, home and lighting, controlled environments getting to be really big at the moment. It worked on several green building projects, and we supply products for HVAC, electrical, refrigeration and industrial. Now, we just recently did a big multi-million-dollar job at the Civic Building, and it has been awarded the highest possible rating for environmental design by the New Zealand Green Building Council. It's the first building of its type to receive a 6 Green Star rating. And what we did there was we supplied a Siemens Apogee automation system. So we covered off heating, ventilation and hydraulic pumps, landfill gas generator, diesel, electricity, process coolers in the server rooms, water metering, rainwater metering, so the rainwater is harvested, stored and recycled for solar cooling and septic uses, solar hot water stored in 36 banks of tubes, MLS lighting, automated blinds, car park extract systems, which is the gas, reducing the carbon monoxide in the car parks, gas detection system in the boiler house, fan coolers, velocity and pressure controls. And that's all driven off a little laptop.
That's all on the civic building in town.
It's all in the civic building in town. We've had the earthquake, while it's been bad for anyone that lives in Christchurch, has been great for business. We've gone from doing 8 or 9 million a year in the last 3 years. We're tipping 22 million now for turnover. So it's, you know, yeah, it is. And it's great because it's my boss is really huge on conservation and green, or you know, he's a greenie, a real greenie, hence the gecko thing. But the fact that we're getting involved in these types of buildings where we can actually make a difference and be doing things like recycling rainwater and stuff is actually, even though I'm old school and I'll just use what I want to use and drive my car when I want to drive it, it's still good to think that we can be doing that kind of technology. Yeah, well, we were just talking before about cars and the use of Uber and looking at all the cars in the car park and everything that goes into maintaining all those cars with one person in them, you know. And I remember the days of Muldoon and carpooling, and we hated it at the time, but I'll show my age now, but really we've got to start getting back to that type of thing, because I have grandchildren and I want them to know New Zealand how I knew it as a kid growing up, not just full of waste. So, yeah. Now, with EXO, we brought EXO in 2007 for our product sales division. It was a pretty easy rollout. I didn't actually manage the implementation of that, but I was involved in all the data, preparing all the data for migration and so on. And for us, EXO worked very well for our sales business. We had some customization done around quotes and forms, but the rest of it was pretty much there and working. So that was the core finance module. And it worked well, and we just loved the side of the GL reporting, etc. Prior to that, we used Concord, a locally customized package, and the relationship with the supplier was not great, and they were very defensive every time we pointed out something that wasn't working right with the system. And it wasn't live. It relied on a whole lot of tasks being scheduled every night to actually update your GL and everything. So if you were trying to do your balance sheet and you noticed an error, you would fix the error. You would then have to wait overnight for the scheduled task to update the GL, go in the next morning and, oh, bugger, I posted the thing the wrong way. Now I've got to fix it again, do it again, and then wait overnight. So I could be 4 or 5 days trying to get a balance sheet. So that was one of the things behind moving. We brought Smart Touch in on April 2010, and in April 2013 we moved our Setpoint building automation business in, and we implemented job costing. We were running 3 separate databases because we had our sales business, our Smart Touch business, and our building automation all running on separate databases. We use the core finance modules, distribution advantage, fixed assets, and job costing, my favourite friend. We're not using all the functionality yet, and I have to admit that simply we do not have the in-house resource, i.e. me. I don't have enough time in the day to look at everything, and I want to look at things like serviceable units. We have equipment that needs to be calibrated every 6 months on site, so I think that would be a good tool for doing that. And I certainly want to look at the resource allocation or something around managing our service teams and making sure all of the customer calls, who have I got available to actually send out on site. So I want to look at that. We're currently using IMS payroll, barks like a dog for a 47, 49 people company, cannot extract any information out of it. So we're looking to move to a new payroll, and obviously I'll investigate EXO or MYOB payroll because we want integration. Right, our successes, from my perspective anyway, and for most of the users, it's easy to use. You've got a Windows menu base. We're not using dashboards. Our guys are struggling even with just using menus. We've got a local support partner who we've developed a really good relationship with, and the fact that I can just ring up and get some help, and particularly we had issues around our balance sheet, not balancing, etc., that people will actually get online and fix it for us pretty much straight away, so we like that. We didn't have that with our old business software partner. The clarity reporting, which I've got quite heavily into, and the fact that we can customise things ourselves and create our own reports. We have a stack of customization and triggers in place, and I'll talk to a few of those. And we've got about another, how many have I got in the pipeline at the moment? About 12 tasks, customization. Will's working on automating documents for us at the moment so that everything we do is saved against a job or a customer, to save people having to remember to do that. We have some in-house knowledge, and that I had a background in access databases, which gave me enough of a footing to get my feet into this. And even though I'm nearly 60 now, I still like a challenge. I like to be learning, and this gave me something I could take on board. Oh, there's a little bit of a challenge. Just didn't realise back in 2013 how much of a challenge it would be. For the sales and our Smart Touch, it's plain sailing. Smart Touch, we only have one branch. We don't use job costing, so everything's just a breeze, and it's basically our end of month reporting because we've got our processes in place. It's plain sailing. It takes me like half an hour to run off about 30 reports at the end of the month, and I'm using GL report batches and so on as well. For the product sales, the main thing was around the quoting, etc., and we've got that in place with the help of Focus. Love the GL functionality, and I probably will need to talk to Sarah a bit more about some of the things I know are not happening correctly for us. And I love the fact that if I can't get what I want with a report, I can zip into the back, run an SQL and pull it out.
That's what's cool. The next one of our probably more advanced client users of Clarity in SQL, and from the back there, it's always very good to she'll just ring us up and say, I've made this report and it just wants a little bit more, and all we have to do is just put a little bit more in there. It's good.
Yeah, and it's usually because it's like, I want this finished today, and I'm 10 minutes before I'm going off to the plane to Wellington, or having to pick the grandchild up from school, and I'm not going home without it being done, so I'm going to flick it to Focus, or I recognise that I've got to the level that I actually just don't know the shit well enough to go to the next step. So, yeah. Whoops, don't fall off the podium. But yeah, I'm also, because I am probably the biggest user in the background, I probably also cause them the most headaches. At the start of the last financial year, I managed to completely lose the GL trans table. So yeah, so I give them lots of work because I save them work, but then I create them new work by what I'm doing. So.
Interesting and hearing.
Yes, yes. I also have a manager who changes his mind every 10 minutes. He's only actually involved in the business about 10 hours a week, but when he does, he makes my life a nightmare. We change the type of, like job types, we changed that 14 times in 2 months. And of course, each time we had to go back and change transactional history as well because it was affecting everything. So I've had a lot of issues there. So if we talk about challenges, probably I didn't put my boss on here, but my boss is probably the primary challenge because he doesn't put aside the time that I need him to put aside to sit down and think about, okay, if we're talking job types, we're talking job categories, you want to report on sales history, what do you actually want? You need to sit down with me and define that so I can then either do it or task it to Focus in a clear manner so that we can get the work done. And then you'll be halfway through and oh, actually, JC, I think that I might want, oh, here we go. Alex did a lot of work around creating some automated procedures for us to import sales orders into job costing and backwards and forwards, and we'd spent a lot of hours on it, had it nearly ready to go live, and he said, actually, let's just leave the sales business separate. I went, right, so that's a challenge for me. We have multi-branches, so we have multiple WIP locations. We don't just have one WIP location, we have 4. I have multi-branches. The change to perpetual stock has been, for me, a hair-pulling exercise. I didn't understand it. I didn't understand the implications of what it would do to our business, and I have not had the time to sit down and understand it properly. So, Sarah, I will be calling you. Keeping up with the upgrades, we're about 3 years behind on upgrades. Now, part of that has been we've had major issues with our server, and we've had a replacement server put in, and 9 months down, no, last September it went in, 13 months down the track, we're still trying to bed the new server in. It's still barking like a dog. We've told HP to come and take the $30,000 worth of server away. We're going to get it replaced with something else. So I'm not prepared to do upgrades on EXO while the server's not working correctly, because EXO will get the blame for the stuff that the server's causing, as it does. Every time the server goes down, I get 47 people ringing me saying, EXO's not working this morning. And I'll say, actually, it's nothing to do with EXO. It's the terminal server's gone down. Yeah, so, you know, but that frequently happens, all right? Staff resistance, they're set in their ways. They're all, to be fair to them, they're all flat out, and at the moment even more flat out because we're doing twice the business we used to do. Sam is working 70 hours a week just trying to keep up with quotes, let alone anything else at the moment. We've got that much quotes and tenders on. He hasn't got time to learn anything new, do anything new, so that's also been a change. And my other 2 branch administrators, bless their hearts, are older than I, and still one of them doesn't even use a computer still. She gets her daughter to come in after school and help her put everything into the computer. So I've had a bit of a challenge there as well. And the other thing is that the 3 branches have effectively for the first 10 years of the company worked independently, each manager doing their own thing for their branch. Now I'm trying to establish company-wide processes so that we can get the things in place in EXO that we need in place and I'm getting resistance because, well, that doesn't work in Wellington, or that won't work for us here in Dunedin. Well, actually, you all own the business, and if you want it working properly, you need to start thinking the company picture, not the branch picture. So that's been, in general, the challenges. Specific to job costing, lack of resources, i.e. I wished that 3 years ago I had said, you want me to do this, that's what I'm doing for the next couple of years, I'm doing nothing else. I work a 32-hour week, I'm doing everything else in head office, and I just haven't had the time. The last couple of weeks, Ben's been away, so I just thought, well, actually, bugger everything else, I'm going to spend some time on the business software and get that back on track, and hence about 12 tasks going through to focus. And I've got another 14 on the completed list I did myself, so for the last week and a half, because I've been able to just focus on that, I've been able to get quite a bit done. The fact that job costing had no pack slip. We ship out, we did an order last week for one customer going out to site at the university, 14 pallets of gear, and that's only a part of the job. That has to be, we have to have a process for recording what's going out to site, what date it's going out, who signed for it, or who delivered it, right? So the fact that it had no pack slip, Julie Scott initially developed something for us, and then our business processes changed. Alex has been back in there working on that for us recently, and we've got our working packing slip and EXO ready to go live, and it's pretty sweet. And it's very easy, and if my Muppets in Wellington and Dunedin can't use it, then there is something wrong, because all you've got to do is click into the supply now column and put how many you're delivering, and Alex has got everything else working in the background. So a lot of respect for Alex. I think he's a very clever person, as are most of the focus people. We had a lot of complicated reporting requirements. We're basically not using any of the reports out of EXO because they didn't work for us. We've developed a lot of our own. We have a lot of customization. I've also done a lot of work, some of it I've done, a lot the focus team have done, where I've thought about where the users could actually make a mistake entering the data that might impact on the output that we're getting, and we've automated as much of that as possible. And the complexity and size of the projects we manage. For example, we're in at the university at the moment doing the work there. We've got projects that are going to run over a span of 5 to 6 years, and we're talking in excess of $10 million. So we've got a lot of complex work going out there. Now, I just wanted to show you some of the reports that we've kind of added in. So the top one, the job material report with the drill down, this is one that was developed for the team by us so that they can run this off the screen and look at all the gear they quoted, what they're not going to use, what's come in, what's gone out, what's still got to be supplied, etc. That's very useful. And then we take the same report effectively, because I'm pretty good at this. I get Focus to do one, and then I go in and I bastardize the hell out of it to create another 3 or 4, so that I can give each branch what it needs. So one branch wanted it sorted by stock code. One branch wants it sorted by sub-job, because that's the way they work. So the same report does the same job, we just sort it different ways. We've got a packing slip detail by sub-job and our packing slip detail. So this is generating off our packing slip functionality, and we can generate this for the customers. I'm just conscious of time, so I run a bit fast now. But here we go. Here's our packing slip functionality that we're about to go live with. So what we've done is used extra fields and customized the grid that Kirsty talked about before, right? And we've added a couple of extra columns in. We have supply now, and we have supplied. So the user just pops into here, drops in how many they're going to deliver at this particular delivery, say puts in 2, clicks the packing slip, gets the packing slip up, they can look at it and they go, oh, actually no, Hal, I wanted to supply 5. If they haven't done the click to generate, they can go back, they can change the number. Once they do the click to generate packing slip, that commits that information to the database and then drives the packing slip. And then we can just pop in and we can get a reprint of that packing slip at any time as well. So that, I've been testing this extensively all of last week, and I haven't been able to break it. And I gave it to someone else to break, and she's pretty good at breaking things too, and she couldn't break it either. So I'm pretty confident that next week, once I just check the data and the job material reports, we're going to go live with this. So that for us has been our biggest challenge. At our last directors meeting, the call was made that if we didn't have a packing slip functionality by Christmas, they were going to throw EXO out the window and get a new package in. At which point I said to my boss, that's fine, and you'll get my resignation at the same time. I am not doing this again. We have invested so much into this that I don't want us going backwards. We're so close, and it's very easy for me because I'm in at the ground level, and I know how close we are to get it to the point we want it, that to throw it out of the window now and have to go back and redo all of that again, I haven't got that in me. You know? So, yeah. But we've used customization heavily, as I say, particularly on data entry fields and things. Basically, once they enter the customer, we've got the branch driven off that. That drives the WIP location. That drives the job manager. If they change a job to in progress, that's updating status fields that we've got sitting in the background. So we use extra fields and triggers and things quite heavily. We've got job codes. They didn't like the fact that everything just had a number. They were used to seeing W for Wellington, C for Christchurch, D for Dunedin. We've got customization in place for that. And that means they can search, they just do a C dash and they can search just their jobs. They haven't got the hang of the fact that even though I sit with them repeatedly and say, you know, you can tick these boxes and you can just get the jobs that have got your name on them and what have you. So, yeah, but no, pack and slip was certainly a big challenge for us, but we've just about got there. I'm so excited because I'll be able to it'll just take a lot of pressure off me when we get this in place as well. But we felt, and the directors were quite right, it was a flaw of job costing to not have pack and slip functionality. And for us to go in and redo it, and sales order was, come on, you know, we've got 30,000 jobs in our database since we implemented this thing, so not practical. Yeah.
Thanks.
Yeah. Alrighty.
3 questions for you?
How do you do your progress billing? Do you do progress billing?
We do claims, so we do claims. Sorry, I should have touched on that. We have basically 3 types of billing. We have service call out, so that's what got used, who went out and out the door. We have service contracts, so what we do there is we generate a service invoice and report. So we used to have a Word document for a service report and then the invoice out of the system. With Focus's help, we merged that into one document, so we put it all into job costing, and when we generate the invoice for the customer, the service report is part of the invoice now, and that again is just time and material straight billing effectively, or it's a fixed price contract with that, so that's just a straight progress claim. And for our large jobs, we have the job at the airport, we did 42 claims for over 4 years, so we use progress claim billing as well. One of the issues that I've had so many headaches with perpetual stock is because they're not supplying the goods when they do their progress claim, and they're allocating it to the progress claim, but not the goods aren't supplied. So we've had issues around that. So I developed a trigger. We've got a trigger in place for that now. I've got a report that I run. I actually run it weekly, and I get my offsider to do it for me now. That is items not supplied on a job where the status is invoiced, and she just goes through and supplies them all against the invoice. So that's one way we've got of dealing with our WIP, because we've got the multiple branches, so that's one way of dealing with our WIP. I have another issue we had is the way our job summary report is done. It works off the fact that the job has a start date, and if it doesn't, then it doesn't appear on the report, so we had to customise that. So basically the minute the job goes to in progress, it has a start date, so that they don't have to remember to fill those fields, and so a lot of automation around that. Customised job summary reports. I think we've probably got about, between the two sides of the business, about 40 customised reports or more. I'd hate to think how many triggers. Renee and I are just in the process now of trying to document all our customisation, because I'm quite wary that if something happens to me, from a risk management perspective, none of that stuff's recorded anywhere, so we need to have that in place for a business continuity perspective. Yeah. So no, we do progress claiming. That works well.
Alrighty, so moving on to the next session, we've got Nick now to talk to us about MYOB and what's happening back at HQ.
Yeah. No, thank you for that. So
You tell me you're going to develop a participant now.
no, it's written down. I've got it written down now. No, I mean, it's actually a very good opportunity for me to see what you guys are actually doing with this system, because I'll just give you a bit of an introduction to myself. So I'm Nick Savage-Mady, and I work for MYOB, and I've worked for MYOB for nearly 7 years now. And just give you a bit of an indication of what I actually do. On the next slide, actually, there we go. I'm what's known as a product specialist, and what a product specialist actually means is that I'm very similar to what these guys do, but I generally train consultants, so I need to know what's inside the product. So I'm not so much the person who says this is exactly what needs to be in the product, but I can definitely sway the decisions on what should be in the product. And just in terms of my experience, like I said before, I used to be a welder fabricator, so I'm from Sheffield, so Sheffield Steel. I used to build and manufacture stainless steel trays for the food industry and lots of different bespoke fabrications. So really job costing for me is very much a pet subject, because every industry that I go into and every implementation that I used to do, I would go and sit with the clients and work out what is their business process, how do you actually use, how do you build something. So whether you're building an umbrella all the way through to, a big dump truck, I'd actually work out how they do that. And then that's where job costing is really good in terms of being able to adapt to suit all those different needs. Okay. Now, in terms of what I'm going to take you through today is I'm just going to take you through some of the new things really, just in regards to some of the new features that are coming out. And some of these new features are as a whole throughout EXO itself, but I wanted to pick out some of the items that are to do with job costing, centered around what we're talking about today. And ignore the fonts, because they're meant to be slightly different, but it looks all futuristic and everything like that. No, exactly, yeah.
I just like your new brand.
Oh, yeah. So this is our new brand as well. So this is the marketing people have decided to give us some new fonts. So that means I have a lot of work in terms of collateral and all of the user guides. So got a wee bit of work to do in terms of that. Now, the new features that I'm going to kind of cover off just in terms of what's coming out in, some of these are actually already in 2016.2, and some of these other features will be in 2016.3, which is going to be released next week. Okay. Now, in terms of what I'm going to do is I'm going to just take you through and show you what these features actually mean, rather than just showing you screenshots, because it's a little bit more, obvious of what they are used for, rather than just talking about them. Okay. So the things I'm going to cover off is I'm going to cover off to do with the purchase order grid side of things. I'm going to mention about the extra fields as well and give you a little bit more indication of what they do, and also it says there extra field increases. Now, it's a very small minor thing, but it is a very important thing, because the amount of extra fields before were around about 24, and they've actually increased that, because most people want to put their own bespoke items into, because every single industry, and this is what I was saying before, is different. So whether we're doing plastics or whether we're doing wheelchair manufacturing, you've all got your own individual needs within the system, and that's where EXO job costing is fantastic, because you can adapt it to suit exactly what you need. Now, the other thing that we mentioned about as well, which we're talking about the WIP side of things, so how to actually find out what hasn't been released and you've closed off the job, is I can show you this little bit, which is to do with business alerts. And the reason I'm mentioning about this is because when we introduced business alerts, which was probably about 4 or 5 versions ago, we just brought it into play in one little section, and now once that actually worked, then we're spreading it out across the system. So what you'll find is we're actually mapping this out more into different modules, and also allowing different parts of the system to utilize this. And then I'm going to just show you about the stock search templates, and the templates as a whole is actually a very great feature which doesn't get utilized by a lot of clients. Some clients may use it, and also this flows through into our API. So Focus can actually build entirely different screens and use the API to call that, and they can actually use these search templates within those APIs. And also we personally use that in our EXO on the go. So I want to show you what that can do as well. And then the last little bit is just more of a, if I can get it working, because it works on my laptop. So we'll see if we can get that triggered. Now, in terms of what I'm going to show you is, if I just jump across into, if I can get into EXO. Oh, okay, right, thank you very much. Let me just shrink that out of the way. There we go, and that one there. If I can use the mouse. That one there. Ah, okay, thank you very much. Fantastic. All right, so in terms of
when I mentioned about the purchase order grid itself, I'll just open up EXO itself, because I guess most of you use actually purchase orders, and I'm sure you all do. Yeah. Now, previously what we actually had was most of the areas within the system have EXO grids, okay? And the only one that really didn't have it was the purchase order side of things, okay? So the grid itself was built completely differently, and the sales orders and the purchase orders were essentially built by two different developers. So one of the things we decided to do in terms of based on clients' feedback was that they needed to have the ability to actually add in the extra fields that we mentioned. So in fact, if I just cancel out that one and just open up this Crown Enterprise one here. Now, in here, what I've got is I've actually got turned on the new grid type system. Okay. Now, it obviously doesn't look any different to what you're probably expecting and what you're used to, but what it means is that it now gives me the ability to actually introduce extra visible columns. Okay. Now, this in itself is, if I just go into Utilities, when we rolled this out, we actually rolled it out in 2016.2. But what we did was, we try, and I'm saying this tongue-in-cheek, we try to roll things out that don't break the system, okay? And that's why I'm saying it tongue-in-cheek, because I know most of you have dealt with things that have got rolled out. And I'm completely, I know this happens. Now, what they actually did was they actually rolled out, hang on a second, sorry. They actually rolled out the system, and this little feature here was use the old grid is turned on by default. So most of you won't actually see these visible columns and be able to add extra things in because simply it's turned on. So it means that the system will still work how you are used to it working. Okay. Now, if you go through and actually take this off, then it means that you have access to this new grid. And it then means that we can now, if I wanted to, in this instance I've got my purchasing side of things, so I can add in my extra fields of what vessel is the items coming in on, what type of, what origin of, what point of origin, so this is where it's coming from. Now it then means that I can simply just, as you're used to with most parts of the system, you've now got this new ability within purchase orders. So you can now just see that we can have everything dragged in place. We can also have, then I can just save them and take them out of play. But what it actually means is it now means that you can adapt the purchase orders area far better and exactly the same as what you got in job costing and exactly the same as what you got in sales orders. Okay, so even though it is a small little feature, it is actually quite a major thing that people have been asking about. Okay.
The consultants are nodding.
Yeah. Now, the other thing as well, just to show you, in terms of the extra fields, and yet again, this won't mean a massive, well, it may or may not mean a massive amount to you guys. But what we actually did was, in terms of extra fields, is you can see in here, this is what I've got on my purchase order lines, but if I just cancel out of that one and just show you the job coster header. Now, what we've done is, you're not using the latest version. That's why it's not showing up. Right, okay. What happened to the XEs that I gave? Oh, it's alright. It's okay. Yeah, so hang on one second, guys. Yes, it is, yeah. I can actually, yeah. Perfect. Let me just undock and redock. There we go. Alright, here we go. Okay, so in terms of the extra fields, if I open up this one, you can now see we've got plenty more extra fields. So they've increased it from 24 to 38, okay? Don't ask me why they came up with the number 38, I'm not entirely sure. But the other thing that I would mention is that it now means that from your main screen, so if you're actually in job costing, so if I just jump back to my job costing screen, it means that it actually increases, normally speaking, when you've got extra fields, you've got 3 on your main screen and then you've got the tab with 21, okay? Now, what it means is that we've now introduced the fact of being able to actually have, on your main screen you do have the ability to have 5, okay? So if I go into this one here, you can see that we've got 5 extra fields from that main screen. So yet again, it's just added those extra items that you need to actually be able to see. And then on the, if I had extra fields along here, we'd have another tab with the extra 33 within that tab itself. Okay. Now, like I said before, it probably doesn't mean a massive amount, but in terms of some of the users of job costing are actually getting past that point of we've used all of these fields. Okay. Now, the other thing to note as well is the fact that the extra fields in terms of the API is actually fairly unlimited. Well, not unlimited, it is limited to 100. Okay, so if they're building an entirely different screen, so if Focus have built an entirely different module and they're calling the API. So what an API is, it allows to call the different fields within your system and create a form that you've built. And then it means that all of those fields come through from that. So not only do we have the table that has all of the information for job transactions, we then have the extra 100 extra fields. Okay, so they've introduced that side of things. Now, I just want to mention just in terms of extra fields, because we mentioned about how useful they actually are, and they are incredibly useful if you look at something along the lines of this. And this is where my job coster header, I actually added in a foreman for my extra field. And what I can actually do based on this is I could have a standard edit where I could just type directly into it. And if I show you an example just in terms of the drawing number, it means that's a standard edit. So in terms of my job then we can actually see that this is my drawing number. Okay. Now for this foreman though, what I've actually done is a little bit smarter, because what I can do with it is I can actually do a drop-down selection, a drop-down SQL selection. Now that means I can select from here, but then I can actually say where it's only showing me staff members who are relevant. Okay, so then that means I can actually use my extra fields to limit just down to these 5 people. Okay, so this is where you really think about the extra fields, because you can limit to say, right, when we're actually putting in this extra field, then I'm going to use this table and I'm going to use these resources, but only showing the resources that are for this location. So you can actually add in different kind of parameters to then drive what appears in that drop-down list. Okay, so yet again, it's got, this is the amount of power you can get from the extra fields themselves, and hence why we mention about them.
Some great memories coming from over these 2 over here.
That's good. No, that's what I like. That's good to know.
The extra fields are also a really useful tool in terms of reporting as well. They can be programmed into reports to be an additional filter and things like that. So that's just like, I know personally put on a lot of extra fields just for report filtering, so that things can be ticked or unticked or whatever, so that they appear in different reports, and that makes the information easier to review if you can sort of break it down into more bite-sizable chunks.
We're using it, well, I'm in the process of using it for our service contracts, because we have some that are built monthly, quarterly, 6 monthly, whatever. And we had an incident 12 months ago. We had a receptionist at the front desk, and I was looking at it all thinking, well, when do these things get billed? Who's supposed to see them? Who's supposed to? No idea. I was sitting there at reception trying to sort it all out. I thought, gosh, I'm going to chuck some extra fields and Excel. It's like, as I got the information from the relevant managers, it was like, yes, you can bill it automatically. I don't need to see it. No, I need to see it. Don't bill it till I tell you to bill it. No, so I added all these extra fields.
Yeah.
And now the plan now is to just be able to go and report like that. She's right at the end, at the start of each month, run a rock, tell me what's going to be billed this month, and and whether I can just do it, or whether someone's going to see it, or whether someone's going to actually do the work.
Exactly, and this is really, this is where you tailor make it to suit your own business, because if you can record the information and then report, if you can record these extra fields, then all your reporting can be based on those extra fields. So it means you've got a fully adaptable system based on what you actually do, rather than, oh, let's use this field, let's use this field. Okay, so it's not about renaming fields to then suit your own needs, it's about adding these extra fields into it. Now, the other thing I just mentioned just on the extra fields is that when you're dealing with lines, so in this instance of the purchase order lines, you've actually got grid columns. So a grid column means you can add it in as an extra visible column, so it means certain people can see that extra field, or you can have it turned off on normal users that don't need to see it. Okay, but the other thing that comes into play as well is on some of the items, and it may be relevant for you guys or not, is there's a little events area which actually triggers, if I add in a stock item, then it pulls through, I've added an extra field for weight, and it draws it through as soon as I update the stock item. Or it'll bring through a dimension, or it'll bring through something like that. Okay, so they add these little extra events into here, and it means that the extra fields can drive those events. Okay, so it can be. Now, what I would say though is, I'm just showing you based on this because they are increasing where they appear. So you can see under job cost header, if you type in a job cost, if you add an extra field for telephone number, for example, then it automatically pulls through the telephone number of the customer onto your job costing header. So on that main screen which we're looking at, it means that as soon as I change who my actual account is, it'll then pull through an extra field, and you can have a foreman who always deals with that company, and it comes through based on that. Okay, so you've really got some powerful underlying factors in terms of that.
I can just,
yeah.
You mentioned ordering the lists, so that any time we're using an extra field where we're doing the kind of filtering thing, we can also choose what order we've got.
Yeah.
You've got something that you need.
Yeah, the resources one for me is the magnetic staff, because we had, 12 staff leave, and there's still a list on everything.
Oh,
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Exactly, and that's,
If it's an extra field, we can absolutely change it.
and for me, I'm pedantic. When I brought up the staff list the other day to do the presentation, I went, hang on a minute, there's EXO admin, there's sales, there's like random sales, that kind of thing. So that's where you can really restrict it based on, whether they're active, inactive, whether inactive stock items, and so on and so forth. Now, the other thing I wanted to mention about, which is a very powerful feature as well, is a little bit of a knock-on from the event reasons. Okay, so just give you a bit of history in terms of this is when we had event reason classes, if someone came along and actually changed that supplier, well, not supplier, let's say the customer's on stop credit, when you untick that, it would then come up with a warning and say, you could say, yeah. Now, as you can imagine, every single person just went, oh, that'd be great if we could do it for this field, or for this field, or for this field, or for this field. Now, what they did was they actually built a thing called business alerts. Now, business alerts actually allow you to do it based on if I'm saving a sales order, or if I'm saving a purchase order. So as soon as you hit save, what actually happens is, if I'm doing, say, purchase orders, for example, then on this one it says stop purchase orders against locked jobs, okay? Or we could say that don't let someone put in a on a sales order, don't let someone put in a discount of more than 50%. Now what this means is, based on a little bit of SQL, we can actually type into there what we want it to stop on. And we can then also choose whether it's going to be a warning or whether it's just going to block it entirely. Okay? Now, when we look further down, there's actually a full job costing section as well, and we can see save job costing transactions. So if the job has outstanding purchase orders, it should be addressed. So before we actually complete this job, there's outstanding purchase orders. So in a similar kind of principle for the WIP, this is where we could actually put in the SQL down the bottom to then block the job from being completed, okay, or being saved. If it sets to complete and these haven't been signed off, then block it, or pop up a warning, or there's even an extra thing which is under actions. Now in here we could actually create a new action and it creates an email. So it emails the person who's actually in charge of doing this normally to then notify them what the job is, and what actually happens is there's a little thing called @EXO link, and if they have that in there, the email comes up and gives you the job number with a URL. You can just click directly on it, straight through into the job. Okay, so for those ones that don't have the WIP items closed off, you can do that side of things.
As I say, we've got a report I run that does that. And the other thing is that we use the status, staff of the branches can put a job as completed.
Yes.
So I'm the only one that can archive it. So when I go through and I look at all the jobs that are completed, and I'll go in and make sure everything's allocated off, that it's billed fully, that we've been paid, that the WIP's been, all those little bits and pieces, the passwords as I call it, and then I'll archive it. And once it's archived, no one other than I can.
Yeah.
I've got the initial JC for a reason. JC, job costing, Jesus Christ.
So as we were talking about before in terms of the reporting side of things, this is where it really comes down to how you want to do it. Because if you just want to run off a report to show, right, these are all the ones that I need to check, or do you want to be notified on your phone of, this is the next job to actually do, or this has just been completed, I need to go and check it. So it gives you that extra little level of ability.
Of extra options that are in here, and you can actually set that to send straight up to the client. So you can have certain kinds of actions. And you can email invoices. You can't email invoices and statements from that. I can set up things to do that, but that's SQL triggers.
But yeah, on that where save debtor invoice, that can be set to kind of send out.
Oh, okay.
Yeah. Well, not send out an email, but that can notify them that the stock's being supplied or such.
Yeah. But the one other option that is touched on in there is that all of these rules can be applied to only certain staff members. So you might have someone who is ignoring some warnings. So you can make a warning for most people, and you could block just one staff member from doing something. Because you don't trust them, or because they're just being incompetent.
What I'm not seeing is this.
Now, the other thing just to mention as well, just in terms of, like Will mentioned, is that you can apply to all users or set it to be, who it's actually relating to. So if it's sales orders and you don't want or quotes, you don't want the quote to be, they've given a 50% discount, then you can just apply it to your sales team. The other thing that I'll mention as well is that the bit within 2030, so this came out in 2016, I think it was 2015.1 actually, but in 2016.3 they added in this accounts area. So if you save a debtor, you can set events against debtors, stock items, contacts, serviceable units. Now this means that, say for example, especially with creditors, if the bank account number changes, you can set up one against that. So it means that if someone goes in and changes a bank account number and then tries to do a payment process, then it triggers and blocks them. Or you can actually set it up in terms of, if I just show you in this, you can set it up as silent and it tracks it. So it tracks it behind the scenes, and then you can run reports based on the information in that table. And it'll give you the username, it'll give you the actual timings, so you can see, not just for bank accounts, but if someone's doing the incorrect process and you want them to always fill out order number, you can track this and then re-educate them based on that. Okay.
We're using business alerts. I've got like the sales team. We've got the GM's under 20%. The customers on stock credit. It's one I want to add in is if it's under $200, because if the item's under $200, we don't discount it. So
yes.
Discount price under $200. We're using it around our service contracts with things like with the council, because their purchase order numbers change every month, and we get an advance notice what that purchase order number is, and that's the purchase order number we use for all service for the month. So we can just, I just pop in an update business alert and say, please use PO 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7 for July 2016. So it saves the girls that are doing that, you know, the data entry at the front counter.
Yeah,
trying to remember all
they need to do the
so,
quick stuff. Yeah, exactly. And just also bear in mind, all your extra fields will incorporate into that. So if you've added your extra fields, then it incorporates into business alerts. So you've really got the system actually doing the work for you. And like we said, if we're entering all the information in and doing the data entry, then it means that someone else can, you know, pick up on the things that need to be done and then train them to do what they need.
Well, what was the table we needed to give us a grip? Finish report slides. Is it in the pipeline?
Yeah, that's true actually. Yeah, I'm not sure. I'll find out actually. Yeah, I'll ask our product manager actually and find out. You can actually do, yeah, so business alerts on serviceable units as well. So if I just so this is only introduced in 2016.3 though. So I mean, there's no example of a rule set up in there at the moment, but that is actually when you save the serviceable unit, then it triggers based on that. So
we've actually used that on some of ours where we have a service maintenance contract with the client for $500 per service or whatever it is. If we've got a trigger on the extra field that if we've got a quoted amount rather than time materials, it pops up saying service unit has a quote. Do you want to proceed? So, yeah, it's a override function. It's just a trigger for me and doing the billing, knowing that I'm billing time materials for yeah.
I mean, one of the reasons, like Tony mentioned, is actually to replace a lot of triggers, because a lot of triggers get built into the system to do a lot of things that this actually does now. And the reason we've done this is because triggers can interrupt certain flows, and that's where we try and detract away from that. So with this, it means that you can actually run it via this alerts area rather than building in extra triggers.
And that gives you the ability as users to write and change these as opposed to trying to take on writing the trigger in SQL in the database and then prompting that through in the front end of your
So the SQL of this is just much. I think it's what it is.
No, you need to learn how to do SQL. Yes, you do. Yeah. And within the help files themselves, there is actually a list of all the kind of, trying to think of the word for it now. Well, yeah, database diagrams, but also the syntax that you actually need to use. It'll tell you what you can actually use. No, it's not. Anyway. Now, the other thing that I wanted to mention as well was to do with this little area, because I know, obviously, I think we're over time now, aren't we? Yeah. Now, in terms of stock templates, what this actually allows you to do is we can do search templates, and search templates, I'll just point out more usefully, is under this stock one here. And what this allows me to do is, if I'm actually doing a purchase order, so if I look at, where is it now? 1 second. If I look at this one here, now what I can actually do is I can go through and put in a bit of a script, and it means that, in fact, I'm not on the right one. Supplier stock, here we go. So this one actually, strange, okay, there we go. So this one actually goes through, and whenever I raise purchase order, it means that when I pop up the stock box, it shows me that this is what the supplier actually, normally supplies for me. Okay. Now it means that I can actually set these up, or I can say for sales orders only show the stock items that this, salesperson can actually use, and you can tie in an extra field based on that. Now from here, if I just do a preview, I can just see what information is going to be pulled through based on this query. I can also say where it gets shown. So I can say that it's only shown in purchases and it's shown in the API. So if, yet again, I've built an API, I can pull this through, and I can say which users it relates to. Now, a lot of this means nothing right now, okay? But what it means is that if I go back into my job costing, for example, and go into purchases and create purchase order, if I pick out, let's just find a supplier, so if I pick out Aussie Car Parts, then when I go and select a stock code, I can then just go supplier stock, and they're the items for Aussie Car Parts. Okay, so you can tweak the SQL just to say this is what I want to look at. So for the sales side of things, you saw what were the last 10 products that were supplied to this customer, or what are, the 100 top selling items, and you can build this, and it simply means that you, instead of having different filters, which we used to have, we can just have those there, and we can just bring it back to normal in terms of that. Now,
so that every time you bring a purchase order, it defaults to supplier.
It defaults to supplier stock. It's a good question, actually. I'll probably have to. I'm not sure. I don't think you can actually. Yeah, no. But I'll inquire. I'll inquire just to see if there is any ability or any kind of option in the pipeline. The other thing is, I know for sales orders on the go, this can be utilised as well. So if you've got people out on the road doing that side of things, you can link that through as well. Okay. Now, just the last thing in terms of last thing really is, this is a very minor thing, but for me personally, it's a great thing as well. Is that you can see if I want to bring on my purchase orders, I've got it there, and I can just get rid of it. I've got stock search, there we go, so I can get rid of that. Now, I know you don't really notice, really doesn't make a massive amount of difference, but you can see that the actual elements of the system are now split. So instead of just opening up EXO Business and job costing, if I go out of here, so for example, no. Now if I close out of this and go back into my job costing, it means that I can open up purchase orders, I can open up plan maintain jobs, and then simply I can just tab between things. So like I said, it's not a very big deal, but it actually is quite a big deal. Because if I then choose to close one of these, it means not everything closes down, and you can flick back to things. Okay? And also, if you really want to get fancy, different colorations. Now, they've just brought this in because of the modernisation of Windows 7 and Windows 10. They've just introduced these side of things. Now, I left them to last because they are just purely cosmetic, but being able to tab between different screens is one bugbear of a lot of people. Okay?
Even just now, I think it was 2015.1, you brought in the actual named tabs on the bar on the bottom that just used to be all the same, so you couldn't differentiate between which one was job costing and which one was distribution advantage. That was revolutionary for us, really, just that bit.
Now,
funny the little things that make a difference, or what seem to be the little things that make a difference.
Yeah.
Now, I just want to show you. Oh yeah, I can just log in and do whatever now. Great. This is brilliant, Sarah. Now, the last thing I just wanted to show was, when it comes to the evolution of EXO, we're always listening to the clients, even though sometimes it doesn't seem like it. But we introduced this probably, I'm trying to think, about 6 months ago, I think it was. No, it might have been a little bit longer, actually. Now, this is the ideas portal. And generally speaking, what would happen is you guys would ask for an enhancement. It'd get logged in a thing called Archie. And I was laughing when we were talking about systems and how we had to get 5 different branches integrated into one system and working. MYOB is quite bad at doing that as well, because we have our business, we have our SME division, we have our enterprise solutions, we have our practice solutions, which are accountancy, and then we buy Greentree, we buy IMS, we buy Ace Payroll. All of these have to come into one, and we use a thing called Archie. Now, as you can imagine, it's very hard to monitor all of these enhancements. So what they did was, we actually built this for EXO Business and for MYOB Advanced, and it means that the partners can actually log enhancement requests, and then people can actually go in and vote on these enhancement requests. So all of the business partners actually vote on these to say, oh yes, that's a massive bugbear, and this is what actually drives the new releases. Okay, so the last 3 releases have been based on this. Okay, so it means that we're getting more relative kind of feedback from you guys and then pushing it through. And you can see under here, future consideration. I can even actually go on and say under planned, we can see these are the items that are actually planned, and that's what it's all based on. Okay, and then the shipped bit, I'll actually tell you what gets shipped. There you go, purchase order EXO grid, simple ledger posting with presets that can be run without. I don't know if anyone knows about that either. The fact that you can run post to GL just by a scheduled task. So you don't even have to go in and do that. It'll just run straight away. Yeah, that was 2016.2. So I just wanted to show you that because even though I've gone through these items here, I wanted to just explain the whole process of enhancements now has actually altered, and you'll find that a lot more features will come through based on what you guys want.
So when you guys as users make these suggestions to us in the past, we've logged them in Archie, and there hasn't been a lot of visibility from us. Well, you know, we haven't been able to see whether MIB are even considering them or whether they think there's something else in the system that can do that. So that gives us now the ability to keep you updated on feature requests that you've asked us for, and we can say, oh no, MIB planning this in the next install and things like that. But it gives us that information that we didn't previously have.
Excellent, thank you. Thanks, Nick. Any questions for Nick on that? Christian?
Not to go job costing. If you've got a wholesale company with multiple branches, with stock and purchasing, you've got your main supplier on your details one stock tab, and you can have alternate suppliers and all the rest of it, that's fine. But every branch potentially buys from a different supplier. They might be child creditors of a head office, or they might, in some cases, we've got the same creditor set up with different branch headers because that's how the supplier wants to deal with each branch. And we get problems with people ordering the product
from the wrong supplier, yeah. So it costs more. Yeah, exactly.
It's really messy. So with the new, I was just trying to think of either the extra fields or.
Yeah, I'm just wondering. I mean,
you
could potentially do that.
Siemens, for example, our major business partner, they're our master accounts on the stock items, that is the primary supplier. But each branch has a branch account. Siemens, Christchurch, Wellington, Dunedin, so we've got a similar.
Yeah.
We looked at using, we started to do something around you can restrict purchases to a supplier. So we're looking at using a trigger that says that if it's a Christchurch-based staff member, they can only use Christchurch account. But that didn't kind of fire either, because when we're down a frontline administrator, then one of the other fields will jump in and do their work. So
because
we're still kind of playing around.
Yeah, because I mean, one of the things is the supplier stock table. I'm just wondering if an extra field could be added into that, and then a business alert could be fired based on that. So
whether a branch could be added to, I just can't think of what's the easiest way.
I'd use a business alert to do that side of things.
And what would a branch?
You could use the extra field to do a lookup of your branches to select the case.
So when you set up your alternative suppliers for that stock item, add an extra field into that table that actually loads when it pops up, and then have that extra field as the branch. So for this branch, we buy it from this supplier, and then when you raise the purchase order, you then get the alert to say this should be this. I know what you mean. Yeah.
Close to 70,000 stock lines. That's a lot of maintenance.
Yeah.
It's almost like doing it from the supplier
You can do it
side
from,
rather than stock.
I can talk to you later.
Yeah.
And just for brevity, we're just going to quickly move on and do
Yeah.
the
Yeah, sorry, yeah.
More questions after.
Thanks, Nick.
I'm going to be outside anyway. All right, thank you. All right.
Thank you very much.
I'll come on.
Sure.
And Nick and I will see in the carrot bump you.
Ideally.
So look, we'll just jump back a bit to slide page 12. Well, you're going to run straight to Drive now. We've got a couple of other slides here too.
It's okay, we can follow up.
Sorry about that. So, what I will do is just thinking my way quickly around a problem.
Can we put it in?
I'll need to quickly install it. Does someone else want to take questions for a minute while I quickly play with something?
Actually, what I can do is cover progress billing.
Yes.
So I just want to close out of that website.
Oh, I'm turned off screen sharing for the moment.
Cool. Okay, so progress billing. Why would you use it? Progress billing is really mostly for your quoted projects. Okay? So quoted projects tend to be broken into stages, and those stages are often what you would bill out. So the progress invoice lines can be entered into the job either via the quote budget tab and then converted into an invoice, or they can be entered in directly into the billing schedules tabs, that's two different tabs in job costing. As time and materials are used up on the job, in the timesheets and costs tabs, they can be assigned to the correct progress invoice. So what this allows you to do, because it doesn't change the value of the invoice, but what it does do is move your stock and assign it to the invoice, and it allows you to capture the true costs and profits, obviously from your invoice to the actuals that are used up on a job. So anybody that works in a projecting type sort of work, quite often what they invoice out to the client is quite different to what they actually time and materials get spent on the job. Okay, because you'll have an agreement with the client generally for progress billing, and it will allow you to track the stages of the job, and it will allow you to report finally on the end of the job on what it's actually cost you to complete the job. Now this is fantastic because quite often people can't do this in a jobbing site. They can't accurately go at the end of a job and say it truly cost us this much, including the cost of your materials at the time, and we made this much of a profit. But not only at the end of the job can you do this with progress billing, it allows you to keep track of it all whilst the job is in progress. So for example, we've got 4-year-long jobs. This is great because you could have quarterly reports running to show you, where your progress invoicing is going and still capture the actuals on the job.
Yeah, our report shows us job, quoted time and material, actual time and material, bill to date, extra invoice, and what.
Exactly right.
What does it do to the chicken ledger?
Beg pardon? Sorry, I'm just...
We'll come back to that one.
Yeah, I wasn't sure how
It does move the stock around though.
It'll move the stock, but then you're not necessarily allocating the cost, well, depending on when, I'm presuming, because I haven't tried this, when you allocate those stock lines to that progress invoice.
And then post.
Yeah, depending on the period, then you may not get your sales and costing in the same period anyway. Is that correct?
Possibly. It is a timing thing, you're right.
Yeah.
Yeah.
I wasn't sure how, with the new particular stock starting.
From what I've seen in one of the other things is that it posts it, so I might allocate it to a March invoice,
Yeah.
if the stock item came in February, it goes to the February ledger.
Okay, so it does, it's the period that's assigned to the job.
Yeah, because if it's allocating to stock at the time, and you've got your posting that happens per what you were showing earlier.
Yeah.
The allocation to the progress invoice is purely within the jobbing ledger, not your financial. Is that correct?
I don't know, sorry.
We'll come in halfway through this.
Yeah.
We'll follow up with that one, Jackie. But good question. Are you going?
I will be ready in about a minute.
I'll move on then to quoting in jobs. Now, I'm not sure if any of you guys use quoting in jobs. Did you know that it can also be used as a budgeting tool? So it might not actually produce a formal quote that you would present to your client, but you can put in what you expect the job to cost you and do internal budgeting and report upon that as well. So the quote lines are their own little entity in the database. They don't affect your stock, so you can put in whatever you need to put in there
to help you report from what you think you're going to, so quite often when you start a project, you have an idea of the kind of money you think you're going to spend and make on that job. It's really, really hard often to quantify that after the job is done. So this is where you can actually use the budgeting aspect of the quote and budget tabs, not actually presenting a formal quote, although obviously you can, but you can also use it as a budgeting tool for your organisation. Quite often organisations will develop a significant...
Just on that point, the use of the quote budget tab, even if you don't transfer those lines through the cost tab, is really significant in the analysis tab. So you go in and you've got the widgets that produce the graphs and everything like that. That's where you're going to, by default, get the best overview of that information in a comparative sense. It's going to give you a bar graph that's got lines for what you quoted, it's got lines for your actuals, and it's got lines for your invoice as well. So you can have a look in there to make sure that that job is tracking, particularly if you've got a long lead time on jobs, so when you set up the budget or the quote against it, and the turnaround might be a few months before it's invoiced, and then costs can fluctuate quite significantly in that period of time. So at that point, you can keep an eye on it, and you can periodically check that tab or run that report, and just keep an eye on how you're actually tracking against what you envisioned this job being worth to you when it was first opened.
Thank you for that, Sarah and Kirsty. Sorry to everyone in Invercargill who I turned this part of the screen sharing off for. I was just quickly setting something up and was trying to save you staring a lot of setup screens flash by. As you can see, Jibe was actually quite quick to set up because that was from scratch. So Jibe is a tool that lets you search through your job costing lines for invoicing at the end of a month. It's really quite great because I've got all these searches here, as you can see on the main screen, that let me see what kinds of jobs I'm going to bring up. And I'm just going to bring up anything that's ready to invoice. I'm just going to select all job statuses. Let's start. Now obviously I'd normally be choosing just jobs that were a bit more specific. I find some here for Paul Holland. So I can click on this job to see what lines that are up. And here are the lines for this job. So I can go through, and the glory of this is that I can say, actually the cost is different, so no, why can't I do that? This is a kit.
Entry criteria to work in progress and reach invoice.
Yeah. Great demo. This is better. So if I look in here, I can see various jobs. Here's one that Sarah set up ready for invoicing earlier. And if I come in here, I can see the unit costs. I can overwrite those if I need to. And same goes for prices. Or I can set a markup percentage to say, well, it's going to be 10% markup. And I can just choose set lines as. So this is a really nice, easy job management tool that gives me the ability to just come in and quickly edit these before I save them. Once I've decided everything I'm ready for, I'm going to set lines as ready to invoice. Yep.
And this is where you can pop in and look at all your jobs that are saying as closed or complete, look at all work in progress or ready to invoice lines, and then within Jibe, you can cancel them all, write them all the lines on the job. So instead of having to run a report and say, here are my 80 job numbers that I have to go in and deal with active lines, just open Jibe, you can filter on the job status criteria, and then you can just see what Will's doing here, just go on a line-by-line basis, double-click, open it up, and within those lines you can write them off or cancel them or invoice them or whatever needs to happen to them to get them off that job. And then once you put next business alert in, you'll never be able to close a job again with active lines on it. So it doesn't become an increasing problem. You're actually decreasing the extent of the issue as time goes on with the implementation of these tools.
Excellent.
Just a side note as well. Will has demonstrated that we can update the lines individually whilst we're drilling into the job. But what if you've got a collection of jobs, they're all good to go already through other reporting, you can actually select all of the lines and hold down the shift key and it'll actually do groups of lines. And then you can bulk update all of your lines from, say, work in progress and into ready to invoice. Okay, so you can imagine the time that it would take somebody to go through your timesheet tabs and your cost tabs and go ready to invoice, ready to invoice, ready to invoice, and then actually shift them into invoice and then carry on doing that. Which, for some of our clients, for an example, I have a client with this. It was a 3-person job and it took them an entire week, literally 7 days, to maintain their jobs. Big client. And actually get their invoices out. They installed Drive and it's now 1 person's job and it takes them in a day.
Huge streamlining on box.
Yeah, and again, it's not an all or nothing sort of situation. You can use Drive for some of your jobs, like as Tracy said, like the ones that you know all the lines are ready to go, they've been reviewed, and you just want to click a button and invoice them all. Okay. And then there's other ones that might be a bit sticky or tricky that need to be done on an individual basis or using progress invoices and things like that. So there's all these ideas are used in conjunction with each other rather than only one. Yeah. So it's completely flexible.
The one other feature that's not been mentioned in this screen is because this is a nice EXOsoft product, I can drag and drop up here because it's acting as a pivot. And so I could just say, well, actually what I need to group these by the status. I can quickly see all of the statuses grouped together.
Nice. And you can print them out so they become reports.
Right, so print button sitting right here.
What do you think, folks? Who wants it?
This is an add-on. I think, and I'm not...
This is an add-on, yes.
But I think it's 1495. It's a database license. So that's the initial cost of the product. And from there on in, I think it's $3.95 a year to kind of... But I'm guessing here. Yeah.
And you'd really only need one.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah. Yeah, so it's per database. It's not got nothing to do with the users that are actually using it.
Yeah. So that's a super cool way to streamline your office.
Yeah.
Streamline
As you can see, I can use it for everything from the job management. So I can say I want to attach, detach.
So you can use progress billing as well.
You can use it for progress billing.
The cost on the job, you can still progress billing X number of dollars.
There's some complication around the progress billing. We require the quote lines to be set up to become the invoice line. But yeah, we've got ways and means.
So it's just an adaptation of your process that we have to sort of look at.
Yeah. But yeah, in terms of getting your invoices out, so do you want to follow up on that? Where it goes from there, or?
So where it goes from here, I can, sorry, just go back to clear my grouping. Select all lines as
We have to set it up that fast for us.
Yeah, pretty much. Yeah.
You probably want to take slightly more care than I'm taking with motor parts. So after invoicing, I can say these are all finished, but obviously I could choose no change if I don't want to just make a bulk change to every single job. I can set the narratives if I've got a particular,
Invoice narrative. So this is fantastic for those that are in progress invoicing. Things like that. You can say there's September's invoice covered from this date range to this date range in regards to this purchase order, so on and so forth. You know, so if you narrow down your search to do that thing, then within Drive you can have that narration on your invoice and it will post on your invoice each data transactions. So, and it's strictly re-invoice, so you can imagine where you would normally key this in or write this text in the narrative for each invoice as you generate them. This will do it for all of them in one fell swoop.
Can you put wildcards in there to bring something in from like a merge?
No, it's just straight keys.
Yeah. But as the narrative field is really, because it can't use text and things like that in that field.
so I'm sure I want to continue. I'm going to say yes. Here we go, invoicing to jobs.
Obviously, there are a lot of jobs with work in progress lines.
And now I can print a review.
To your,
Yeah, so from that point onwards, you go back into EXO. Business, sorry.
that's not there. You have to run it off C. Yeah, because you attached it to.
I did.
Yeah, so workshop. Well, it's complicated.
I'm so good at clicking on buttons, as you can all see.
So the process from this point onwards would become to reports.
Yep.
As long as your data is all set up correctly, with emailing and printing, you can run it off through your invoice batch printing, and that will generate your mail shot invoice emailed out or your printed ones, depending on what you've got set up. Done.
Except of course I'm having trouble finding invoices.
Date range.
It'd be my date range.
So you can in Drive also pick the date that the invoice is generated for. You know, so if you have a weekly cycle or something like that that you bill out, or a daily billing, then you can use Drive for that. Or if you have a monthly cycle or whatever, you know, because obviously in the menu jobbing businesses, it's not generally a monthly billing thing. You do the work, put the time and materials against it, close up your job. So you can be running Drive daily to run through this really quickly. Especially if you've got teams of guys working and you want to get those invoices out quick.
There we go. Nice and easy mail shot.
So if you're not familiar with the mail shot screen, we would definitely recommend becoming familiar with it. It's great for invoicing, it's great for statements, probably more common, particularly if your invoicing process currently is on a job-by-job basis and you're just emailing the invoice off the job. You possibly don't use the bulk invoice sending tool, but we can use a similar one for statements and also creditor remittances as well if your creditors require those things.
So the email and print settings come off the debtor or off the creditor if you're doing creditor remittances, and you get the primary email.
You don't to confirm each email screen, is it?
No. Unless it's your very first one.
Yeah. But then once you've got all your settings set up, you can just click go, and it'll go step through the list, and it'll change. It'll put a little tick in the done column once it's sent, and then it will just appear as an item in your sent items in Outlook.
And just in case you didn't know, you can manually overwrite those email addresses or add email addresses in there. You know, so if you've got a person in there that might get it differently this week because the other person's away sick or something like that, and they've informed you of this, then you can edit that.
And one thing good, so I use the email status and it's got the nasty bit of picking up generally if there's a contact loaded in this
Yes, the default contact.
as opposed to the default email on the data screen. So quite often it'll be going off to a sales contact or an IT guy or the MD or whatever, but really should be going to the accounts.
Can you set the statement contact on the data?
Statement.
Yeah, so
So you can set a different default for that, and that's where you would input.
Should it not just automatically pick up the default email on the data
There is one,
screen?
yeah.
It's just one of the hierarchies within the system in terms of where it gets its information from.
so
We use
what
both,
it's-
because on our front screen, that's who gets, we deal with a lot of head office branch type data. So the branch wants the invoice, but they've got it signed off,
Yeah.
sent through the HO, but HO gets the statement. So on our front screen, we're using the invoice, what we call the invoice address, not the details too, is where we send the statement.
that is
Yeah, that's the way it works.
what Tony was asking about, just in case everyone not here couldn't hear, was when you're using a mail shot, it will default to your default contact rather than to the email on the front page of the data screen, which, as was mentioned, it's actually supposed to be using the statement contact from the screen. So if you set it in here, it will be exactly who you set it to. Otherwise, it will use the default contact if there is one, or if there's no default contact, it will come from this email box. Unfortunately, that's a limitation. We could request a change to MYOB, but I don't think they will be changing the exact inheritance on that screen.
If it gets enough votes.
If it gets enough votes,
Yeah.
So what I'd recommend for anyone who is having that problem is that I know what Focus does. We have an accounts address that we've set for absolutely every company we deal with. And then your statement contact is Cobalt, accounts Cobalt, and then it just goes to whoever that is.
Thanks, Will.
And that information we can, you provide it to us in a CSV format, can upload it automatically into the system with the parameters around it. So we can speed that process up for you if you wish.
Right, folks, it's just a little up to midday. We've got a couple more slides, I think, to deal with.
I don't think so.
Cost types and cost groups, grade and asset.
Yep.
Quickly run through those, and then we'll just handle the cost of the Q&A.
Not quite sure we
I'm not so sure we need the slide right now.
So you're back at the slide.
Okay.
On page 13.
Oh, miles ago. What I'll do is I'll shut it down. I feel like such a midget standing in front of this. Take me seriously. Okay, cost types and cost groups. Now, many people with job costing don't know that there is even cost types and cost groups. Does anybody know about them here? You do? You do? Nobody else?
Okay. Uneducated audience.
Brilliant. That's exactly what we're after. Okay, just trying to find job costing here. Okay, so a cost type and a cost group. Essentially, they are reporting tools. And they give you the ability to identify the lines on a job. So they're set up, they can be user set up, so they're not very difficult to set up. And here you come within job costing and you can see cost groups and cost types. And basically what they can be used for, well, they can be used for anything really, and I do have clients who use them for some quite interesting things, especially if they have time trackers. We actually grab them and use them to do clever costing and pricing of things. But just within EXO, they can be a very good way of breaking down the lines on a job. Okay, so here, for example, we've got professional services, workshop expenses, and disbursements. If we come into these, we can copy from the quote lines, and we can identify and group in our quote also by these cost types and cost groups. So in our actual formal, document that we might send our client and things like that, we can identify those lines and group them into our reports. So under this we've got disbursements, under here we've got our professional services, under here we've got this, and our cost types. It can be automated to pick up markups. They can have overheads. They can belong to a general ledger. And if I can expand that out, it can fire off or belong to a different cost group, for example. So delivery might always be a disbursement. If we come into a job, let me put that down, and I'm using someone else's database.
You can't put your hand up. Oh, I've just EQC around our house this morning, so I might be in the market for a new house.
Okay, so for example, in here we can associate the lines on the quote against a cost type and a cost group if they're turned on here. So we can say this is labour and this is labour for our professional services, but if it wasn't for professional services, but actually our workshop, now we're getting reporting that makes sense. Okay? But not only that, if you're keying in your timesheets or your materials on your costs tab, so just in case you don't understand the difference between the two, timesheets is your labour. Okay? All your labour should hit your timesheets. Or your materials should hit your costs. Okay, so they're two quite distinct functions. They do the same thing, they all end up invoiced, but when you're trying to track the difference between the two, and in lots of reporting and lots of external products, they will identify them as two quite separate things. Because in a jobbing industry, they are two quite separate things. So in here, your timesheets, they can also belong to what the guy has actually done, depending on the kind of work. So if you're in an industry where you might have your guys work across multiple branches, for example, or you might have divisions and guys can work across those divisions, you can identify their labour and their material and use your cost types and cost groups to be your division identifier. Okay, so if, for example, he works in professional services generally, but we've pulled him in to do the workshop stuff because the other guy was away sick, you can identify the labour that he has done for that and report upon that.
Yeah, and that allows you to assign any costs related to that back over to the correct division. That's something that we've just set up for quite complex set of reports for a customer, where that happens a lot. The staff run a workshop and they sometimes they're on, you know, one machine or another machine that's all set up as divisions, and we've got it tagged where if the job line goes to a certain division, then it pre-populates a journal for them to move the wage costs to that division as well, just for that portion of time.
So set cost types and cost groups can have, again, it's one of those really simple features that job costing have given us, but our clients grab it and run with it with lots of customization. My example is where, you know, their job costing and all of the extra fields and things like that are working perfectly for them. What they couldn't do is capture the payroll integration. So they didn't integrate with an EXO payroll, they integrated with an external one. So what they did is they had the client would be charged was the normal labour rate, but what the guy would get paid for overtime and other penal rates was housed in their job costing in cost groups and cost types. Okay, and then they would produce a report out of job costing that they would then key into their payroll system based on that. So you can imagine if you've got quite a different payroll system, and admittedly this client's Australian, they have a load of penal rates that they have to meet, offshore work, overnight work, all those sorts of things, which New Zealand, especially now with all of our new rules coming in, we're having to meet as well in our payroll systems. You know, they've used that information from cost types and cost groups, so that's really strong tool. So
can I quickly show everyone something? I know
We're running out of time.
We're running out of time, but we'll just put through it really quickly because it's something that I've showed a couple of customers recently and they found it to be quite amazing. So if you're purchasing on a job-by-job basis, so the stock that you buy in is only for a particular job, within this quote budget tab, you can go back here. We can enter all the stock items that you want. You want some of those. You want some of these. And we just go down and obviously we've got suppliers set against all of these stock items. Once we do that, we've got this copy to column. And if you hit P for purchase order, there, and save, one of these buttons here, this one, generate purchase orders. So that will generate the purchase orders to all the different suppliers for those stock items that you purchased, and it will insert it into there so that when you receipt the stock in, it comes in tagged with the job number and goes directly against the job. Now most of you will be doing that, but you might be manually keying that job number against purchase orders and lines when they come in. This automates the entire process, and it's just another step in the smoothing of your business processes. So just thought I'd quickly just talk about that. Yeah, and it all just puts it into the purchases tab here. So as they progress, all this, they just move from. Oh yeah, just in here. Yeah, yeah. Check that out.
But anyway, so that's a wee feature that's by default in every EXO job costing system that you might not be aware of that can really speed up and increase the accuracy of that. Now we're on to questions.
We got there. Wonderful. Okay, so now it's open Q&A session time. This is when you sort of all talk about problems, ask some questions of the consultant here, share some knowledge. Anybody like to start us off? Or pick on someone?
Please feel free to pick.
Yeah. Joanne, we haven't heard much from you today. Perhaps you could enlighten us with something.
No, it's because I don't work in the job cost.
You don't work in
Then
the job cost?
Don should really be the person here that is away.
Oh, okay. All right.
So I'm just here listening and learning and taking back.
Good. Did you get some
So
good
see
tips?
what, just, you know, this is as good as I can go back now and just make sure that this is actually all the stuff that they are using.
Mhm.
And if something has come up,
Okay.
there might be some
We will be,
opportunities.
we are recording as well, and we'll post the recording of the workshop onto our YouTube channel, so it can be, you can go back at any point and review that, and then if you need extra copies of the job costing handout that I have, then can put that, just get in touch, and we've got all that information available at our fingertips.
Thanks. Any questions?
It's quite standard reports on serviceable units.
Standard reports on serviceable units?
Yeah, like the age of the serviceable unit and what sort of work done on serviceable units.
To be honest, because serviceable units are so basic, initially the reports are also very basic, out of the box. But if you do adopt serviceable units, you will inevitably make them more complex. So we would have to write complex reports to match that. Yeah. Because out of the box, serviceable units is an incredibly simple thing.
You're using serviceable units now, I think you. And how you find them?
Oh, you use them all the time. That's
Good.
But we don't really reporting on it.
Oh, yeah, and you do need to
report.
Yeah.
So get a report to see some of the age of the equipment or what.
But
So this is, so explain a little bit further. So you're wheelchairs, so you leasing out wheelchairs?
So every wheelchair that we manufacture with a serial number and we put that in a serviceable unit.
Okay, so you sell it
And then whenever we do any work on it, we put that work against that serviceable unit so we put it through.
So is it a unit that's sold and leased or
They're all sold.
all sold?
What we don't know is
how much work
the
is
work
it?
we've done on it.
Yeah.
We're not doing work on all of them. It'd be nice to know which ones haven't touched.
So do you identify your serviceable units with models and things like that? So that would be really useful information for you, because then you can see which models are good sellers, which ones require more work. You know, because I'm guessing different shapes, sizes, weights that they have to hold, all that sort of things can have a play on the life of a wheelchair.
Yeah, we probably should get that information from other places, but it's the age and how much work.
Yeah.
Yeah, and what would be the best way to sort of schedule a serviceable unit so that it actually triggered us in either a calendar format or an alert format and said, look, we told the customer we do this on the 31st of March. How's a way that we can get that actually popping up rather than running a report where it pops us?
That's how to schedule it.
Yeah, even
You can schedule reporting under EasyView. If you've got an EasyView, that's another EXO soft product. Reporting can be scheduled on a however frequent basis that you wish, and it can be email. So we're setting that up for a customer. Well, I was talking about the gas customer, and that's what's going to happen every day, every night to bed. But it's going to print all the jobs. It's going to run a report that has all the jobs in it that is scheduled with a start date of tomorrow. So at 4:30 today, it'll run a report, and it'll have every single job sheet for jobs scheduled to start tomorrow. It emails it to the service manager, and he just prints it off. If he's scheduled to print as well, but he wants to review it in an email from first. So that's what we're doing there. I'm not sure what EXO's got out of the box in terms of scheduling and things like that, but
Yeah, we're going to take it in minutes. There's nothing out of the box. So, but you, again, for a number of things which say, like, this is a report that needs to go up to branch managers every day or every week. So we can set up scheduling for that kind of thing.
that can down on SQL, don't they?
Yeah. Done with SQL.
That's good things.
Yeah.
Benefits of serviceable units.
Well, within the serviceable unit screen, there's a field that says lifespan, which is set on a number of months, I think it is, and commissioning date. Now, the report we run to schedule services works off the two.
Mm-hmm.
So commissioning date being January, February, March, whatever, lifespan is usually 6 or 12.
Mm-hmm.
So every 6 months, based on the commissioning date, it generates a new job, say there's a service due on this unit, or maybe 12 months, or whatever it is, based on the commissioning date. So you can vary those commissioning dates. We're going to produce it once a month, but I'm assuming you can do it more often. And you can also spread those commissioning dates out, so they're not doing everything in 1 month. You can on the bid. Not all your customers are due in January. And so that produces 80 jobs, 100 jobs, whatever it is every month on set services to be done. You can then also build your documents into serviceable units so that you know, like for example, with this site, we would have site plans with layouts of where the control panels are, where the batteries are, where the card readers are, where the detectors are, and so the technician will be able to go through and say, right, we're checking this, and it just...
The other thing I'd potentially suggest as well in terms of reporting is that not necessarily building a report, building widgets. So widgets themselves have got refresh on them. So you can actually just set it up to say, right, when I first come in, a widget itself is just an EXO grid. So you say, this is a serviceable unit, what's the next service date? Then as soon as you log into the system, you see that widget, and it's up to date right now. And then it can actually refresh every hour, or it refreshes every time you log in the morning, it's just refreshed based on, and you're using the date to be kind of like the sort. So that's going to be the most frequent, what jobs do I need to do today, or what items do I need to, are going to be coming up in the next week. And the beauty of that is not only does it refresh, you can then just drop it out into Excel or whatever you need, or you can just refresh it yourself as well. So the widgets are very powerful.
The thing we can add to the widgets is making an EXO link each time or two.
Yeah.
You can turn an EXO link on your system, and then you can click on that and it will open the right screen. And the same goes for reports, and you can click on the links and then we'll click on the links and email and take you right to the right screen.
Very good use service units. Gravity.
Actually, I'm surprised, Graham, that you don't use serviceable units for your big machinery.
Yeah, because it's probably, it's more neglected use, isn't it, on machinery in terms of resources. It's used a lot in like equipment that's leased out or hired out or has to be maintained on a set interval. But we see a real lack of use around it in maintenance of machines and equipment and vans and things like that. So you can just keep an eye on the maintenance and...
So you can do anything but the production machinery. They're big, expensive.
I've had the privilege recently of being, attempting, I use the word tempting strongly here, getting my head around all the P6 and their processes, and they use some, from what it sounds like, some really big equipment that must need constant maintenance.
Yeah, it does, and we'll maintain it and for that using RNM code, so it'll go against that eventually.
Yeah.
But yeah, haven't thought
I mean, you're already complex, so maybe that's more complexity than you need.
Yeah, but the vans, you've got rego, you've got warrant, you've got road user charges. Yeah, and diggers and things like that. Even down to water blasters and things like that, and the snake cans and things.
Especially tracking kilometres and everything like that as well, and all the amount of hours and things like that. It's, definitely something worth serviceable unit side of things.
Because you could trigger a prompt. We could potentially put an extra fuel on and trigger a prompt, but this vehicle needs to service it, every 10,000 k's or whatever. Who's the one that's keeping track of that information? Is it the guy driving the van every day who's blind because of the amount of kilometres on the speedo, or are you waiting for a letter from the people who service it say, maybe it's still service? So then you're sort of taking control of that, and then
We do all our own servicing.
Oh, okay.
So we've got our team of mechanics. You still need to actually do it, but then you need to have someone for him in the workshop.
So really, the serviceable units were initially designed to allow an organisation to maintain their own internal products. So it's to start their machinery, their vehicles, those sorts of things. That's all what it was for. It's really the clients that have taken in and said, well, actually, I can use this for something that I would sell and track. But yeah, job resources, big thing. You buy them, they depreciate, they require work on them, they consume hours, they consume materials to have them on site. I mean, we don't even have big machinery, but I can think about servers, a generator, all these things can be serviceable units that we can maintain our actual business costs against. Yeah.
You have to, if you're using them for your clients, then you have to have a different setup for you.
You have different classes, don't you? Yeah, because you've got all these extra fields, it's good.
I've set up a chunk and focuses on stuff that tracks what versions people have. Because we ran out of extra fields. So I was putting the things in that I need to track.
But yeah, you can use them for dual purpose. You can use them internally, and it's just set up on the class of it, and the reporting can be run on that basis, and then any extra fields for the stuff, sort of categories that you want to report on as well. So you can definitely do both.
Mm. And you might want to consider it for the fleet of vehicles you've got out on the road. You know, seriously, she took out
And just watch Alex's eye twitch. He's fine.
Wonderful. So look, it's almost 12:30. Is there any last questions before we wrap up? No? Well, thank you for investing time and coming on today. It's certainly valuable to us to talk to you and hear your concerns and problems. And I guess going back the other way, getting a room full of experts that we've got today with us. So well, thanks everyone for coming along. The next EXO workshop is going to be late February. We haven't yet determined the theme, so please use your feedback forms now and maybe come up with some suggestions, things you'd like to see. We can certainly try and accommodate you. But yeah, thanks so much for coming along. Perhaps a round of applause for us all.